Chapter 22:08 Heaven Suppressing Monument. Jian Wushuang looked closely at whatever he was shown. The heavens cracked and countless divine demon experts died. Suddenly, everything flickered and turned dark. Jian Wushuang returned to the floating province with 99,999 steps. Jian Wushuang turned pale. He just came out from the ancient display. However, he did not finish watching the second scroll of the ancient display. He only saw the bold man's divine body explode after casting certain techniques. This caused heaven and earth to crack and shatter. Jian Wushuang had no idea what happened next. What happened after this? After this bold man died, what happened to those who attacked him? And about the heaven's will? Jian Wushuang's heart twitched when he thought about this. That was the first time he felt the real heaven's will. He could sense there were rules of order within the eternal chaotic world, but the heaven's will was of even higher level. Who could be at the level to understand and use heaven's will? Only the superpowers back in the ancient past who became so powerful that even heaven and earth disapproved of his existence. Then would the heavens will come and suppress that expert personally. Who was that bold man in the ancient display who could force heaven's will to dissipate with one look? How powerful must he be? Jian Wushuang took a cold breath when he thought of this. You should have seen those things. Emperor 13 looked over and said, Yes. Jian Wushuang said, right when he was about to ask more questions. Emperor 13 continued, I know that you have a lot of questions right now. I cannot and will not answer any of them. When the time is right, you will know everything. Jian Wushuang was caught by surprise, but he did not proceed with raising his doubts. Emperor 13 looked up at the bold man and waved his hand. A unique energy radiated out towards that man. The energy fused with the dark space. Then a streak of brilliant light was seen in the dark space. This streak of light began to enlarge before revealing its true colors. It was a gigantic gray monument. It was 10,000 feet high and was made up of gray crystals that was not ever seen before by Jian Wushuang. The gray monument floated in the dark space and soon moved in front of Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang studied the monument, but could not see anything. It was a blank monument, as it had no inscriptions at all. It was an ordinary monument. However, Jian Wushuang knew that this monument was definitely extraordinary, as it was hidden so well in the depth of the head. This is the heaven-suppressing monument. There are 9 of them in this world. One of such monuments is an extremely high-grade treasure. If you manage to gather all 9, you can suppress the heavens and earth. Emperor 13 said with a flash of excitement in his eyes. Jian Wushuang was stunned. He just saw the ancient display and knew for sure that heaven's will was something that is real and present in this world. If Emperor 13 said that one could suppress the heavens and earth, did he mean it could suppress heaven's will? Jian Wushuang took a cold breath when he thought of this. The heaven-suppressing monument is very special and contains many extremely profound and complicated hidden secrets. It is extremely useful for you. I will activate the hidden secrets within the monument. You should stand here and try to understand them. Emperor 13 said, Understand them? Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Given how powerful the heaven-suppressing monument was, how amazing were the secrets it contained. Emperor 13 activating the hidden secrets within the monument was like giving him an opportunity for him to become even stronger. Jian Wushuang had many burning questions, but he ignored them all and started to prepare to understand the hidden secrets. Remember, you only have one chance. How much you can understand depends on you. Emperor 13 said as he started to form seals with his hands and placing them onto the monument. Instantly, the monument, which was 10,000 feet tall, radiated a special aura. At the same time, a gray air current appeared. The gray air current seemed extremely mysterious. Anyone who recognized it would be in disbelief. This air current was rare even in the ancient past. It was the air of chaos. Air of chaos was one of the things that the experts from the ancient past sought after crazily. The air that gushed out of the monument was the air of chaos. Hum, hum, hum. The air of chaos started to drift towards Jian Wushuang as it completely surrounded him like a cocoon. Jian Wushuang widened his eyes in surprise as he stared at the air that was surrounding him. Even though he could not recognize the air, he could feel how pure and concentrated the energy which was contained in the air was. Never had he seen any energy so pure. Without hesitation, he started channeling the heavenly creation skill. As this skill continued to be channeled, all the air of chaos was absorbed through his pores and was converted into his own divine power. My divine power is improving at such a fast rate. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist in excitement. He could feel that he was getting stronger at an extremely fast rate. This speed was not achievable with just self-meditation or any random treasure. The rate of improvement was not so great back when Jian Wushuang was meditating beside the Supreme Emperor Stone. However, this gray airflow was not the truly valuable opportunity. Jian Wushuang looked up and stared at the 10,000 feet tall heaven-suppressing monument. Originally, this monument had no inscriptions at all. Slowly, ancient inscriptions started to appear at the top of the monument. It was gold in color, in a language Jian Wushuang had never seen before. This was completely different from any language there was in the eternal chaotic world. These words were not a unique language from the ancient past. There were many ancient past battlefields left behind in the eternal chaotic world, many of which contained certain ancient languages. These ancient languages had some resemblance to the modern languages the people of the eternal chaotic world use. Jian Wushuang would recognize them if he saw it. However, Jian Wushuang could not recognize these words at all. Chapter 2209 Breakthrough. What are these words? Jian Wushuang was staring intently at the words that appeared at the top of the monument. These words appeared slowly as one stroke appeared at a time. Jian Wushuang was infatuated with these inscriptions. In his eyes, these were not words. They were a whole world. He saw a whole new world within these words. Within that world, there was chaos and no elements at all. However, evolution started to happen as the chaos slowly evolved into mountains, rivers, and the earth. These would eventually make a new world. They were the foundation of that world. Only after the world was made, then life would appear within this world. In the dark space, Jian Wushuang stood on the floating province. His divine body was surrounded by the air of chaos as it gushed into his body steadily. The 10,000-foot-tall heaven-suppressing monument floated in front of him. On the heaven-suppressing monument, ancient words colored in gold appeared slowly and sequentially. The number of words started to increase slowly. Even though these were words inscribed into the monument, what Jian Wushuang saw was the evolution of a whole new world. He was infatuated with this process and was immersed in it. Emperor 13 sat cross-legged beside him before closing his eyes. Time started to pass. The number of inscriptions on the monument started to increase as time passed. Every hour or so, a new word would appear on the monument. This monument was 10,000 feet tall. Hence, tens of thousands of ancient words were nothing as compared to its huge size, much less one of these words. Millions of such inscriptions could fit onto the heaven-suppressing monument. Time passed quickly. After a very long time, The golden inscriptions finally covered every corner of the heaven-suppressing monument. The heaven-suppressing monument had no more room to fit any more inscriptions into. Soon, the last inscription was done. Jian Wushuang, who was immersed in the evolution of that world, heard a boom within his heart before the world he was immersed in finally crumbled as his consciousness returned to the real world. He looked at the heaven-suppressing monument once again and was in disbelief when he saw the countless number of golden inscriptions. Unbelievable! This heaven-suppressing monument is definitely made by an unbelievable technique, Jian Wushuang thought as he clenched his fists. Without a doubt, the heaven-suppressing monument was a precious treasure. Even the mountain river map could not compare. Within the heaven-suppressing monument, he saw the evolution of a whole new world. From the beginning of the world, when everything was complete chaos, to finally when life was born. Jian Wushuang had seen the entire process as he meditated at the heaven-suppressing monument. How incredible was that? It was a pity that Jian Wushuang had only seen up to the point the first life had come about and the scene had ended. This might have been because there was only one heaven-suppressing monument. He guessed that he needed to gather all 9 heaven-suppressing monuments before he could finally see the entire process. Sigh. He exhaled lightly before he looked around. He saw Emperor 13 opening his eyes, looking at him. "You are awake." Emperor 13 spoke, cold as ever. "Yes, Emperor 13. How long have I been here meditating?" 1,081 years, Emperor 13 said. "What?" Jian Wushuang was shocked. It was not because he felt that 1,081 years was long. He had lived for tens of thousands of years. He had been in slumber for 24,000 years. 1,000 years was nothing compared to that. The reason why he was shocked was because he felt that time had barely passed after he had started meditation to the evolution of the world. He thought he would take a very short while, maybe around half a day. However, 1,081 years had passed. So much time has passed. Jian Wushuang exclaimed. He finally understood how the experts from the eternal chaotic world could meditate tens of thousands of years at one go. When an expert at that level used all his heart to meditate, he would not feel time had passed even though tens of thousands of years had gone. You should check out what changed within you. You should have benefited greatly during these 1,000 years, Emperor 13 said. Jian Wushuang was stunned before he checked his own body out. He first looked at his divine power. During the time he had been meditating, the gray airflow had been absorbed by him continuously and turned into divine power. His divine power should have improved greatly. Once he checked that out, he was pleasantly surprised. I broke through? Jian Wushuang widened his eyes in surprise as elation was written all over his face. With Jian Wushuang's fighting power and attitude, any normal improvement would not have resulted in such a big expression of emotion. But now, he could not help it. His improvement was too great. The divine power within his body was near to 10 times the original. His divine power was already almost limitless and could allow him to reform his body a couple of times. Now, that amount of divine power had increased by 10 times. It was not just the amount of divine power, but also the quality of it. His divine power had just evolved. Jian Wushuang had been dreaming of this for a very long time. This evolution was not through any secret skills or techniques. He needed to acquire it through a breakthrough. The evolution would only occur when he broke through from the second phase of inverse cultivation to the third phase. Yes, Jian Wushuang had broken through. During the 1,081 years, he had continuously absorbed the air of chaos into his body to turn into divine power. His divine power had increased at an insane rate. Furthermore, One only needed more divine power to break through from the second phase to the third phase. While he was meditating, his divine power had met the required standard, and he had broken through. Now, he was in the third phase of the seventh step inverse cultivation. This was the ultimate phase. Chapter 22, 10 Sword Doctrine Trial Tower. Ultimate phase of seventh step inverse cultivation. Jian Wushuang clenched his fist, excited. Even though it was a mere one-phase difference between the second phase and the ultimate phase, the difference in power was glaring. Based on the amount of divine power, it was as though there was an ocean of divine power within Jian Wushuang. With such a vast amount of divine power, it would be extremely difficult to kill him, as he too had the perfect chaotic holy body. His divine power and divine body were 10 times as powerful as before. His combat power erupted. With his current power, he could easily kill great emperors using strength alone. The ultimate phase of the seventh step inverse cultivation gave one power far greater than what a great emperor could possess. The power was equivalent to that of an expert in the realm of divine demon. Emperor Bai reached the ultimate phase of the seventh step inverse cultivation and was the strongest in this world. However, Emperor Bai was strong not only because of this, but because he managed to grasp a little of the rules of order. Rules of order, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself as he opened his palms slowly. Both palms were outstretched as he channeled two unique energies at the center of his palm. These two energies evolved from the power of space-time and the reincarnation power. However, a glint of excitement flashed across his eyes when Jian Wushuang looked at these two types of energies. Rules of order. This is the rules of order. Rules of order. Jian Wushuang roared with laughter. That's right. The two types of energies in his palm were the space-time rule of order and reincarnation rules of order. He now had control over both powers. During the 1,081 days, he had been completely immersed in the evolution of heaven and earth. Before heaven and earth could evolve, the rules of order had to come about first. The rules of heaven and earth was the highest form of power in this world. The Supreme Four Doctrine and the Nine Heaven God Doctrine would evolve and eventually form rules of order. The rules of heaven and earth would branch off into these Supreme Four Doctrine and Nine Heaven God Doctrine to form everything there was in the world. Jian Wushuang had seen the evolution clearly during the 1,081 years he had meditated. Not only did he see, but he also felt and understood the evolution process. After he understood the process, he tried it himself and managed to master the space-time rule of order and the reincarnation rules of order. Jian Wushuang had finally grasped the rules of order, and he grasped two different types of rules or order. Even though his understanding was minimal, he had still managed to grasp it, which had helped him evolve to become stronger. I am in the same realm as Emperor Bai. Both of us are in the ultimate phase of the seventh step inverse cultivation, and both of us have a grasp of the rules of order. However, I have grasped two rules of order and have the complete ancient god bloodline power. If I combine the power of them all, Jian Wushuang smiled. Jian Wushuang had the lead based on raw power and understanding of rules of order. As for the secret skills, Emperor Bai cultivated the 9-star armor from the 7-star black sect and was at the golden armor scripture. This secret skill was very powerful. Furthermore, he had cultivated another very powerful secret skill. It was a pity that he did not have the complete version of the secret skill. Hence, he could not use the skill to its fullest potential. After the Great War, Emperor 13 had handed him the complete version of the secret skill. Now, he could maximize the power of the secret skill. It had been 24,000 years since the Great War was over, and Emperor 13 handed Emperor Bai the complete version of the secret skill. Emperor Bai should have successfully cultivated this skill to become even stronger. Hence, Emperor Bai had mastered several incredible secret skills and techniques. Jian Wushuang was not too shabby either. He had the top-tier secret skill from the ancient god clan, the immemorial celestial body. He had cultivated the second scripture, which would boost his fighting power greatly. As for the other secret skill, moon-picking skill, it too was extremely powerful. As for secret skills of Star Palace, that was one of the trump cards Jian Wushuang had, and that could enable him to destroy all foes. As for treasures, he had the Mountain River Map and the Soul-Swallowing Pearl, two high-grade treasures. The Mountain River Map could suppress everything. On the other hand, the Soul-Swallowing Pearl could be used with his soul attack to create an extremely powerful attack, which could threaten even Emperor Bai. The overall battle power of Jian Wushuang would not be weaker than Emperor Bai's. To really differentiate who was more powerful, they needed to have a battle. If I have the chance in the future, I really want to spar with Emperor Bai. Jian Wushuang smiled eerily. Jian Wushuang had benefited greatly from the 1,080 years he spent meditating. Right then, Emperor 13 stood up. He held out his right hand, which contained an ancient black tower. Emperor 13 tossed this tower in front of him. This tower enlarged, and soon it turned into a large tower in front of Jian Wushuang. Emperor 13, this is... Jian Wushuang looked at the black tower, puzzled. This tower radiated an ancient and majestic aura. Without a doubt, this tower was an incredible treasure. This is the Sword Doctrine Trial Tower. I made this personally a long time ago. However, I am not gifted as a blacksmith, hence it was just an ordinary treasure back in the past. You should be able to benefit from it greatly now if you try to venture inside. Emperor 13 said, Sword Doctrine Trial Tower? Is it a trail tower targeting one's understanding of the sword doctrine? Jian Wushuang asked as he squinted his eyes. The restrictions in this world are far too powerful. I can only guarantee you 1,000 years inside. Treasure the time you have inside, Emperor 13 said, and explained no further. Jian Wushuang was tempted. He knew this black tower was extraordinary. Furthermore, this tower had been made by Emperor 13 personally to target the sword doctrine, which should benefit him greatly. Jian Wushuang stopped hesitating as he dashed inside the tower. After he entered the tower, he realized he was in the middle of a vast, dark space. It seemed like there was no end to the space. It was big enough for battles to occur in. My strength and bloodline power are restricted. I cannot use them freely? Jian Wushuang muttered to himself as he squinted his eyes. He realized that his divine power was being suppressed to the level of an ordinary expert in the divine demon realm. At the same time, he realized he could not use his bloodline power at all. Chapter 22:11 Amateur. Within the vast, dark space, figures started to form in front of Jian Wushuang. A young man who had a devilish look appeared. He held a long sword as he stared at Jian Wushuang with his emotionless eyes. Then, whoosh, this young man attacked. He appeared in front of Jian Wushuang and slashed with his long sword. This slash looked normal, and it contained no sword skill. However, this ordinary slash was extremely fast with the power of a divine demon and some rules of order. Is he my opponent? Jian Wushuang stared at the devilish young man and smiled lightly. I also managed to master rules or order, but am not familiar with it yet. I should take this chance to familiarize myself with this new power. Jian Wushuang attacked as he slashed his blood mountain sword. This slash contained the power of a divine demon and the space-time rules of order. Clang! Both long swords collided with equal power. The moment the swords collided, The devilish young man flicked his sword up in a weird manner as the sword was headed for his wrist. Jian Wushuang was caught by surprise as he quickly drew back his sword in response. Right then, the devilish young man used a little strength, and the sword was headed for Jian Wushuang's throat at lightning speed. What? Jian Wushuang turned pale. At first, he knew that the devilish young man was not a simple opponent, as his sword skills were simple and smooth. However, after they started sparring, he realized all these simple moves flowed extremely smoothly. He was perfect. Jian Wushuang was suppressed by the simple sword skill: a slash, a flick, a stab, a jab. Jian Wushuang finally turned serious. A unique sword essence radiated out from him. It was as though he had turned into a large, dark vortex. Sword Principal Xian Luo. Mixed Elements Spirit. Clang, 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 clang. Collisions between the metallic blades could be heard clearly. Jian Wushuang had already used the sword skill, Mixed Elements Spirit, to its full potential, while his opponent simply used ordinary attacks. Within the eternal chaotic world, any cultivators who cultivated the sword doctrine could cast these attacks easily. However, Jian Wushuang was completely suppressed by these simple attacks. The mixed elements spirit he was casting was wonderfully refined. However, even this sword skill could barely fend off those simple attacks. Jian Wushuang could only retreat slowly. His sword skills were completely suppressed, and he could not even use them to their full potential. Suddenly, clang! After a flurry of attacks, the sword that the devilish man held slashed across Jian Wushuang's wrist as the wrist was sliced off, together with the Blood Mountain sword. The devilish young man then stopped his attacks. Jian Wushuang stood there in the dark space in disbelief. He looked at the wound on his right hand before regenerating the hand immediately after channeling his divine power. He was overcome by waves of shock and disbelief. How can this be? How can such simple attacks suppress me? I was completely suppressed and not able to fight back at all. Are those really just simple attacks? Jian Wushuang was shaken to the core. His understanding of the sword doctrine was already extremely high. This was the case in the eternal chaotic world. He was the most powerful sword cultivator. The other almighties who excelled in sword doctrines were no match for him. Jian Wushuang too thought that his understanding of the sword doctrine was extremely deep. Back in the Blood Emperor's sanctuary grounds, he had been unable to suppress the Blood Emperor even though he had the superior power advantage. He then realized his experience in battle was nothing compared to that of the experts from the ancient past. He had to admit that even though there were incredible sword skills in this era, it was nothing compared to those from the ancient past. He had never thought that he would lose to someone who had equal power to him and only used the basic attacks. And he was completely suppressed. His sword skills were like those of a kid compared to those of the devilish young man. It was laughable. Right then, Jian Wushuang, your sword skills and understanding of the sword doctrine might be top tier in the first era. However, back in the ancient past, your understanding of the sword doctrine would be far too weak. You were not even qualified to be called a sword doctrine cultivator. You are an amateur. Emperor 13's voice appeared in the dark space. Amateur. Jian Wushuang was stunned. If the experts from the eternal chaotic world heard that their sword emperor was being called an amateur, there would be a great commotion. One of the strongest men in the eternal chaotic world, the man who was famous for his sword skills, Jian Wushuang. But in the eyes of Emperor 13, he was just an amateur. Everyone would usually look down on the person who said that, but Emperor 13 was the one who said it. Those who saw the battle between Emperor 13 and Blood Emperor, including Jian Wushuang, could not refute this. You are an amateur. You don't even know what sword doctrine truly is. You do not need too much style nor too much power. A person who does not know much about sword doctrine can only unleash 10% of an extremely powerful sword skill, but a person who understands what sword doctrine truly is can unleash incredible power with just a simple skill. In your case, you are the former, Emperor 13 said. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang laughed bitterly. I never thought that my understanding of the sword doctrine was so laughable. This is not to blame you. In this era, the most powerful expert is only in the peak chaotic realm. Rules of order is far too high level for most of you, as all of you live under the restrictions in this world. It is far too difficult to experience what sword doctrine truly is, Emperor 13 continued. It was true. Jian Wushuang was the strongest sword user in this era. The experts in this era were far too weak. If they had been born in the ancient past, the sword doctrine Jian Wushuang would see or experience would be far more than in the eternal chaotic world. Chapter 22:12 Sword Doctrine. The Sword Doctrine Trial Tower can allow you to experience the higher form of sword doctrine. Just like your first opponent, he is considered a beginner in sword doctrine. If you can defeat him with your sword skills alone, you will be considered a beginner as well, Emperor 13 said. He is considered a beginner. Jian Wushuang looked at the devilish young man fiercely. He waved his hand as the Blood Mountain sword flew back into his hand. Let's go. Without hesitation, Jian Wushuang attacked once again. He battled the young man fiercely, with all the sword skills he knew. Before long, he had lost again. Again. Jian Wushuang was not discouraged, and he attacked again. He was completely immersed in his battle against the young man with a devilish look. Even though there was a large gap between the understanding of sword doctrine between the two, Jian Wushuang realized he had begun to understand more about the sword doctrine after multiple sparring sessions. Sword skill can be cast in this manner. Coherent, smooth. A simple sword skill can be more powerful as compared to some top-tier ones. Sword, it can be used like this. Jian Wushuang was a fast learner. He lost countless times against the devilish young man. He would always learn something from each and every defeat, whether it was from his battle techniques or from his sword skills. Or he would figure out certain techniques the young man would use in his sword skills and learn from it. Even though he was being suppressed in every manner, he was constantly learning from his opponent and slowly becoming a stronger cultivator. After 3 years, Jian Wushuang still lost to the devilish young man, but was no longer suppressed. 5 years later, the devilish young man could only suppress Jian Wushuang in the form of sword skills. Even though Jian Wushuang's defeat was inevitable, it would take longer before he was actually defeated. 17 years later, Jian Wushuang could fight the devilish young man evenly head-on. 32 years later, clang! Sparks were created as the long swords collided against each other. Jian Wushuang charged forward as the long sword in his hand turned into lightning and stabbed towards his opponent. The speed was too fast to be described with words. Clang! The tip of the blade collided with the body of the devilish young man. The blade did not pierce his body, but the impact caused him to lose balance and stumble a few steps backwards. After he steadied himself, the devilish young man looked at Jian Wushuang. This time, he did not attack. At the same time, his body started to evaporate. Looks like I finally defeated him. A hint of joy was seen in Jian Wushuang's eyes as he saw the body of the devilish young man start to evaporate. Up till today, he had been inside the Sword Doctrine Trial Tower for 32 years. During this time, he had been constantly battling the devilish young man. They had fought over tens of thousands of times. Initially, he had been completely suppressed. After all these years of hard work, Jian Wushuang had finally defeated the devilish young man. There had been great improvements in Jian Wushuang's sword skills and his understanding of the sword doctrine was a level higher compared to before. The reason why I can defeat him is not just because I have a better understanding of the sword doctrine. I have with me sword principle Xian Luo, which was one of the most powerful sword principles back in the ancient past. This helped me out greatly during our battles. If I were to use the most simple sword skills, I would need some more time before I could defeat him with the simple skills, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. However, he could still go even against the devilish young man if he only used the most simple sword skills. According to Emperor 13, he should be a beginner in sword doctrine. From an amateur to a beginner, Jian Wushuang exclaimed. In the space in front of him, another figure started to form slowly. This time, his opponent was a graceful lady in white cloak. She had a cold gaze. This was his second opponent in the sword doctrine trial tower. Her sword skills were much stronger compared to the devilish young man's. Soon, the lady in white cloak attacked. Jian Wushuang fought back, but was defeated easily. On the floating piece of land, the ancient black sword doctrine trial tower stood tall. Emperor 13 sat down cross-legged again. He looked at the tower as his vision turned cloudy. Sword doctrine. There is no end to the sword doctrine. Even though I reached the peak of the sword doctrine, I still feel that my understanding is not complete. What exactly is the perfect sword doctrine? Emperor 13 muttered to himself before closing his eyes slowly. He had reached the peak of the sword doctrine. Even during the prime time during the ancient past, few could have reached the level he had. There was almost no one who was stronger than him in the aspect of sword doctrine. Even so, he was still trying to chase after a better or higher form of sword doctrine. There was no limit to the doctrine. This was also the case for sword doctrine. Jian Wushuang, who was in the sword doctrine trial tower, was immersed in the battles he had with countless number of opponents. He was learning from his imperfections during these battles. Time continued to pass. 1,000 years flashed by in the blink of an eye. The sword doctrine trial tower still stood tall in the vast, dark space. Two figures were engaged in a heated battle. Jian Wushuang held his sword single-handedly. He did not use the secret skill of the ancient god clan to have 9 heads and 18 arms. To him now, having 18 arms and swords had no difference compared to holding one single sword on one hand. Having too many hands became a burden. He moved his sword around casually. It could be a thrust or a slash or a flick. Each move was smooth and decisive. He moved around elegantly and gracefully as he cast his sword skills. His vision was sharp and focused. His opponent was an elder with red hair. The sword skills of this elder were extremely fast and violent. Jian Wushuang was extremely calm in this battle. During the heated exchange, he was trying his best to find his opponent's weakness. After a while, the red-haired man slashed his sword. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up when he saw this move. He swung the sword in his hands as it thrust out in an eerie manner. Sword principle Xian Luo. Sanguis extremis style. PFFDT. A bloody mist erupted from the elder man's chest as he backed off. This is the 16th one. Jian Wushuang smiled. Chapter 22, 13 Fighting power skyrocketed. Jian Wushuang spent 1,000 years inside the sword doctrine trial tower sparring against other experts. Jian Wushuang had lost count of how many battles he had fought. However, he knew his sword skills were improving at a tremendous rate. No other opportunities could help him improve at such a great rate. This was because he was fighting against an expert of a completely new level. It was as though these experts had opened a new door to sword doctrine. There had been a leap in his sword skills and his understanding of sword doctrine compared to before. Jian Wushuang felt that he could kill his old self with one simple slash. That was how much he had improved. In the dark space, a space tunnel appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Looks like I took exactly 1,000 years to defeat 16 opponents. Jian Wushuang smiled as he followed this space tunnel out of the Sword Doctrine Trial Tower. Emperor 13. Jian Wushuang greeted as he bowed slightly. With the great improvement in his understanding of the Sword Doctrine, Jian Wushuang felt completely different when he looked at Emperor 13 once again. Back then, he had not had a clue how powerful Emperor 13 was. He only knew he was extremely powerful. Now, he felt that Emperor 13 himself was a unique divine sword. The sword essence that he radiated made Jian Wushuang's heart throb. Even though my understanding of the Sword Doctrine has improved greatly, I am nothing compared to Emperor 13, Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. He knew where he stood. He knew he still needed a lot of practice, as his sword skills now were still not good enough for him to go against the Blood Emperor. When Emperor 13 fought Blood Emperor, he was under the restrictions of heaven and earth. He could only use a small portion of his sword skills. However, this little portion of his sword skills was already far superior to what Jian Wushuang had right now. How incredible were his sword skills when Emperor 13 was in his prime. Jian Wushuang could not imagine that. How many opponents did you defeat during the 1,000 years you were inside? Emperor 13 asked, while Jian Wushuang had been sparring opponents within the Sword Doctrine Trial Tower. Emperor 13 had been meditating and did not take note of what happened within the tower. I defeated 16, Jian Wushuang said. 16. Emperor 13 nodded his head in approval. He expected that Jian Wushuang could defeat around 13 or 14 opponents. Jian Wushuang had gone beyond his expectations and defeated 16. The opponents within the Trail Tower would become increasingly stronger, and it would be increasingly more difficult to defeat them. From the moment you defeat the first opponent, you are considered an amateur in the Sword Doctrine. If you can defeat the opponents, you will have reached the initial success. When you defeat 20, you will have reached the Profound Realm. You still have a lot to work on before you reach Profound Realm, as you have only managed to defeat 16 opponents. Emperor 13 said, I've only reached initial success. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. He had thought that the improvement he had over the 1,000 years was incredible enough. He had not expected that he had only reached initial success in his understanding of the Sword Doctrine. You will only reach the Profound Realm after defeating 20 opponents. What if you defeat 30, 50, or even 100 opponents? Jian Wushuang asked. You are still in the Profound Realm after defeating 30 opponents. You will only reach complete satisfactory for the Sword Doctrine after defeating 50 opponents. As for 100 opponents, you have exceeded the complete satisfactory for the Sword Doctrine and finally reached the Sword Doctrine realm. You can then be called an expert in Sword Doctrine, Emperor 13 said. Sword Doctrine realm? Jian Wushuang frowned. From what Emperor 13 had said, there were realms that differentiated people of different levels of mastery of the Sword Doctrine. Jian Wushuang still had a lot of room to improve before he could reach the Profound Realm. Even if someone surpassed being complete satisfactory for Sword Doctrine and reached the Sword Doctrine realm, they would be considered an expert in Sword Doctrine, but not a top-tier one. Sword Doctrine is really broad and profound. Jian Wushuang exclaimed, Of course. As for you now, you need to continuously accumulate experience to elevate your mastery of Sword Doctrine. Even the Sword Doctrine realm is a far-fetched concept for you in this era. However, initial success in Sword Doctrine is already enough for you to completely dominate everyone in this era, Emperor 13 said. Jian Wushuang's eyes lit up in excitement. Jian Wushuang's mastery of Sword Doctrine was much better than it had been before. Aside from the experts from the ancient past, There would be no one within the eternal chaotic world with a greater understanding of sword doctrine. With his sword skill, the amount of divine power he had from the ultimate phase of the seventh step inverse cultivation, and his understanding of rules of order, his fighting power was far greater than what it had been. He was so much more powerful that he himself had no idea how strong he actually was. However, he knew for sure that he could definitely beat Emperor Bai in a bat. Lord Emperor 13, thank you. Jian Wushuang thanked him gratefully. Both the heaven-suppressing monument or the sword doctrine trial tower had helped him greatly as his fighting power had skyrocketed. Both of these treasures belonged to Emperor 13. Both of these opportunities were given to him by Emperor 13. Furthermore, Emperor 13 had helped him twice before, and hence Jian Wushuang was extremely grateful. I have already given you your opportunities. You can leave now, Emperor 13 said coldly and indifferently. Jian Wushuang felt odd. It was true that Emperor 13 had given him opportunities and treasures to help him improve. However, why had he done this? Why did he give such amazing opportunities? What was he trying to achieve? Emperor 13 did not mention this at all. Just like he had said, he would not tell Jian Wushuang anything at all. When the time was right, Jian Wushuang would know everything. Jian Wushuang frowned slightly. Before he had visited Emperor 13, he had many questions that he had wanted to ask and hoped for an answer from Emperor 13. Now, the number of questions he had only increased after what he had encountered within the head, seeing the bold man from the ancient display. However, he did not ask after seeing how cold Emperor 13 was towards him. Goodbye. Jian Wushuang bowed. Before leaving the way he came, Emperor 13 fell silent as he looked at Jian Wushuang as he slowly disappeared from his sight. He looked up at the bold man, sitting there with a glint of uncertainty. There isn't much time left. I tried my best to help the little one. Now, it's up to him alone to reach your benchmark. Old man, I hope everything that you are trying to do is worth it. I hope this little man can achieve it. If not, my 7-star black sect. Emperor 13 clenched his fists tightly and said no more. Chapter 22:14, The Changes in the Lineage of Stars. Jian Wushuang returned the way he came. The various defensive mechanisms were not activated. Soon, Jian Wushuang was out of Chill Wind Valley. Sigh. Jian Wushuang heaved a deep sigh after he was back on the surface. He looked back at Chill Wind Valley, as he was still in shock after what he had seen. He knew that the owner of the head, the bold man, definitely had many incredible secrets. It was a pity that he was too weak to even have the right to know these secrets. During the 2,000 years that Jian Wushuang had been in the gigantic head, his overall fighting power had reached a completely new level, and he was very pleased with it. Time to return, Jian Wushuang muttered. He flipped out a transmission token. Hall, Master Yuan just transmitted a message. Hall, Master Yuan, what's the matter? Jian Wushuang asked. It's nothing major. However, if you are free, you should go back and visit the lineage of stars, Hall Master Yuan said. Roger. Jian Wushuang nodded his head. He then returned to the Green Fire World. After Jian Wushuang moved the headquarters of the lineage of stars, it had been growing at an incredible rate given the excellent cultivating environment Green Fire World had. Lineage of stars had become even stronger and more powerful, even after many top-tier experts had been dying during the battle against the Three Emperors world. 30% of the territory within the Green Fire World was occupied by the different clans from the eternal chaotic world. Because of Jian Wushuang, Lineage of Stars had managed to secure a bigger territory compared to the other clans. A brilliant galaxy hovered in the air. The galaxy had completely recovered due to the abundance in spiritual influence of heaven and earth. The galaxy was even more brilliant and vast than it had been before. The power of the formation was even more powerful as well. Using special techniques, it could help out the disciples of the lineage of stars greatly. Jian Wushuang appeared within the brilliant galaxy. It has been a long time since I was here at the lineage of stars. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. He usually remained within Wushuang City. He left the matters within the lineage of stars to Hall Master Yuan. After the great battle, he had been in slumber for 24,000 years before he had gone to Chill Wind Valley. As palace master, Jian Wushuang had not come back to the lineage of stars for a very long time. The changes within the lineage of stars after all these years were huge. He could feel the difference when he stepped into the vast galaxy. The galaxy is completely different. The number of metabeasts born from the galaxy is far more than before. They also have a much greater effect on cultivators. Jian Wushuang smiled as his soul power spread out and covered the entire galaxy. He could sense that there were many metabeasts within the galaxy, and they were very beneficial for the disciples when they cultivated. As of now, there were several disciples trying to capture the metabeasts. Jian Wushuang smiled as he walked towards the interior of the galaxy. Soon, he appeared within the headquarters of Lineage of Stars. After he had returned to the headquarters, he realized there were far more experts and disciples than there had been before. Both the numbers and quality of experts had increased greatly. Within the Lineage of Stars, the disciples were separated into 3 levels. Everyone started as a normal disciple before they were promoted to core disciple. Finally, they would be promoted to disciples of Star Palace. The number of disciples of Star Palace had increased as well. There were 10 disciples of Star Palace for each level in the realm of Universe God. Every one of them was a top-tier geniuses. For Phase 3 Universe God, every single disciple of Star Palace was enlightened to the power of Heaven Way. While Jian Wushuang was still a disciple of Star Palace, it would be difficult to find other disciples of Star Palace who were also enlightened to the power of Heaven Way. It seemed it's not as difficult for a Phase 3 Universe God to be enlightened to the power of Heaven Way now. This was due to the cultivating environment. After Jian Wushuang entered the headquarters of the Lineage of Stars, he roamed around within the Lineage of Stars instead of going to find Hall Master Yuan. Soon, a battle between disciples caught his attention. This battle occurred at one of the stars. The 2 people battling it out were both Phase 3 Universe Gods. One of them was a disciple of Star Palace, while the other was just a core disciple. This battle attracted the attention of many other disciples as they crowded around to watch. Jian Wushuang was within the crowd. Both senior brothers are very powerful. Senior brother Tian Yi and senior brother Qin Feng both are enlightened to the power of Heaven Way. However, senior brother Qin Feng was enlightened for a long period of time. Furthermore, he is a disciple of the Star Palace and should be stronger. Look, senior brother Tian Yi is already suppressed. Even though senior brother Tian Yi is a top-tier core disciple, he still has work to do before he can beat senior brother Qin Feng. Jian Wushuang heard the surrounding chatter. He shook his head slightly and said, Tian Yi's sword skill is not so simple. He might win this battle. Jian Wushuang commented casually. Jian Wushuang could see that Tian Yi had yet to use all his sword skills, considering his battle experience and how much more powerful he was. Right after he commented, several disciples looked over at Jian Wushuang. You think senior brother Qin Feng will lose? Are you kidding? That's right. Senior brother Qin Feng is a disciple of the Star Palace. Hey, who are you? Why have I never seen you before? Furthermore, what do you mean when you say senior brother Qin Feng will lose to senior brother Tian Yi? A teenage girl in purple clothes stared at Jian Wushuang. Jian Wushuang was stunned. Right then, Tian finally used all his sword skills. It was swift and decisive as he immediately turned the battle around. Within moments, he had defeated Chen Feng. He really won. The teenage girl in purple clothes was shocked as they had all expected Chen Feng to win. In the arena, Chen Feng looked at Tian, enraged. Your sword skills, senior brother Chen Feng. Hall, master, he Xiao mentored me personally. That is why I had a breakthrough in my sword skills. Otherwise, there would be no way I could beat you, Tian said. Chapter 22, 15 Palace Master. Is that the case? The disciples watching then understood what had happened. The most powerful man in the lineage of stars was the Palace Master. Below the Palace Master were the Hall Masters, who were all almighties. Among all the Hall Masters, Hall Master He Xiao was one that many respected greatly. He himself was a genius who was incredibly powerful. By many myths, he was also a lineal disciple of the Palace Master. He was one of the most powerful men in the lineage of stars. It would have been weird if one did not improve greatly after being mentored by him personally. After hearing the explanation, Chen Feng felt more at ease. On the other hand, Jian Wushuang looked weird. He Xiao was his lineal disciple. Never have I thought that little brat would have such a high status within the lineage of stars. Jian Wushuang smiled. You there? You have yet to answer my question. How did you know senior brother Tian has yet to use all his sword skills? Furthermore, who are you? The teenage girl in purple clothes asked Jian Wushuang again. I guessed it, Jian Wushuang answered casually. You guessed it? The teenage girl in purple clothes did not want to let Jian Wushuang go just like that. Right then, whoosh, a top figure appeared on this star, as the aura of a top-tier chaotic real god radiated out in all directions. All the disciples on that planet panicked. What are all of you doing? It was a graceful, handsome young man. Even though he was not angry, everyone was afraid. He scanned the crowd as all the disciples, including Tian and Chen Feng, lowered their heads. Aside from Jian Wushuang, no one dared to look him in the eye. This graceful young man noticed Jian Wushuang. The graceful young man turned pale as he appeared in front of Jian Wushuang at the next moment. Greetings, Palace Master, the graceful young man greeted as he broke out in cold sweat. The reason why he radiated out his aura was to control the situation. He had never thought that Jian Wushuang would be in the crowd as well. Ling Feibai, it has been a while. How are you? Jian Wushuang smiled. This graceful young man was Ling Feibai. They had both been disciples of the Star Palace at one point in time. When Jian Wushuang had just joined the Star Palace, he had fought Ling Feibai and lost to him. Now that they had met again, their fighting power and status were incomparable. However, Ling Feibai was a genius. He was the strongest top-tier chaotic real god. His name was on the real god ranking list, and he had high hopes of breaking through to become an almighty. Palace Master still remembers me. Ling Feibai was pleasantly surprised. Seeing this, the other disciples were shocked. Who is he? Why does Elder He Ling treat him so respectfully? Elder He Ling is one of the most powerful real gods within the lineage of stars. He does not even treat an ordinary hall master with this much respect. If I heard correctly, Elder Ling called him Palace Master? Palace Master? Which Palace Master? The disciples were shocked. Palace Master? How many Palace Masters were there within the lineage of Star? There was only one. The identity of the man in front of them. There are some things I have to do. I shall take my leave. Jian Wushuang smiled as he disappeared from everyone's sight. After Jian Wushuang left, Everyone on the star erupted into a frenzy. Palace Master. Oh my God! I actually saw the Palace Master himself. The Palace Master of the lineage of stars is one of the most powerful men in the eternal chaotic world. He managed to turn the tides of the great battle more than 20,000 years ago and was our savior. He just appeared in front of us. It really is the Palace Master. Never had I thought that he would be this easygoing. The disciples started to chatter in excitement. Jian Wushuang was referred to as a legend. Within the eternal chaotic world, many young cultivators respected him and believed in him blindly, especially those from the lineage of stars and the green fire world. However, it would be extremely difficult for even Almighties to meet him personally. As for these disciples in the realm of universe gods, it was all the more impossible to meet him. However, Jian Wushuang had just appeared in front of them. Oh my God! I just spoke to the Palace Master, and he replied. The teenage girl in purple clothes was dazed. She was overwhelmed with excitement. At the same time, she finally knew why Jian Wushuang knew that Tian Yi had yet to use all his sword skills. Even though it was Hall Master He who had mentored Tian Yi, Hall Master He Xiu was Jian Wushuang's disciple. Jian Wushuang did not know that the disciples had reacted that way. He had appeared on that star to view the battle between the disciples, as it had piqued his interest. After he left that star, Jian Wushuang reached the meeting hall within the lineage of stars, where Hall Master Yuan, He Xiu, Hall Master Gu Xian, and others were waiting. Jian Wushuang sat on the throne within the meeting hall, and the remaining 10 experts sat below him. The number of Almighties within the lineage of stars was higher more than before. Some of these Almighties were originally disciples within the lineage of stars, while others were experts that came and pledged their loyalty. During the battle, the lineage of stars suffered heavy losses. Emperor God Zhou-yin, Emperor God Xianwu, and Hall Master Nye Yun died, and lineage of stars needed experts to fill the gaps. Right now, these Almighties looked at Jian Wushuang respectfully. Come, speak. What happened? Jian Wushuang asked as he looked down at everyone. Hall Master Yuan stood up and said, Palace Master, as you know, the lineage of stars is getting stronger by the day. Our influence and standing in the eternal chaotic world is also improving. Now we are wondering what to do to those enemies we had. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Lineage of stars indeed had many enemies. Back then, there had been 3 forces that had allied together and attacked their headquarters. Luckily, he had been there. With the help of Emperor 13, they had defeated this wave of enemies. After that, because of the Great War, the lineage of stars had focused on improving their own strength. However, they would still fight there and teach their enemies if necessary. However, they had already settled their grudges with some of their enemies. Chapter 22:16 Abnormality, just like Abysmal Palace. Jian Wushuang and Abysmal Saint Master settled their grudges and became good friends. Lineage of Stars and Abysmal Palace would not have any more disputes, as both parties were already on good terms. Like Soaring Heaven King Palace. Soaring Heaven King Palace had offended Jian Wushuang the most back then. However, with Jian Wushuang's current power level, he did not care about Soaring Heaven King Palace. Furthermore, the leader of the Soaring Heaven King Palace, Great Emperor Tianling, had fought together with Jian Wushuang during the battle at the Three Emperors' World. Great Emperor Tianling had given his all during the battle. Hence the hatred between Jian Wushuang and the Soaring Heaven King Palace was not as strong anymore. After the battle, Great Emperor Tianling had apologized to Jian Wushuang personally. Even though on a personal level their grudge was settled, their respective clans still hated each other. The lineage of stars now was extremely powerful. Even though they had not eliminated their enemies, it was normal for the lineage of stars to make lives for their enemies difficult. Jian Wushuang knew about this. Of course, lineage of stars would not cross certain boundaries, and they knew their limits. Why? Are our enemies still trying something funny? Jian Wushuang looked at Hall Master Yuan and asked. These enemies knew their place and did not try anything funny at all. When they saw people from the lineage of stars, they would hide and would not offend us at all. However, the real martial arts divine church started behaving abnormally recently, Hall Master Yuan said. Real martial arts divine church. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Real martial arts divine church was one of 5 members of the Star Extermination Alliance. However, after the battle back at the old location of Lineage of Stars, Real Martial Arts Divine Church had suffered heavy losses. Their leader was killed, and their fighting power plummeted. On top of that, Lineage of Stars had continued to suppress them. This church was at the brink of annihilation. Lineage of Stars had stopped suppressing them after the ancient battlefield had appeared around the Green Fire world. Then, the Great War broke out, and most of the other clans had been preoccupied fighting the war. They did not have excess manpower or strength to take note of the insignificant church. This had allowed them to barely survive till this day. If I am not wrong, the real martial arts divine church did not participate in the battle against 3 Emperors' world. Am I right? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes. When the battle broke out, experts from most clans within the eternal chaotic world joined the war. Some clans sent every single member they had, while there were some that did not participate at all. The clans that did not join used the reason that they were too weak not to reject the call of duty. The real martial arts divine church was one of such clans. Hall Master Yuan nodded his head and said, "Of course, the real martial arts divine church was at the brink of collapse and did not want to send any almighties to the front line. The Sanctuary Alliance sympathized with them and did not force them to participate. After the Great War, the power of the other clans were greatly weakened, but not the real martial arts divine church. They managed to survive their predicament and became one of the more powerful clans." So the abnormality that you were talking about just now is that the real martial arts divine church started to treat us like enemies again, right? Jian Wushuang said coldly, "That is right. The real martial arts divine church originally kept a low profile, even during the 24,000 years that you were in slumber. However, their attitudes changed in the last 1,000 years. They were no longer afraid and acted high and mighty, then they dealt with us. Under normal circumstances, the Lineage of Stars would not cause trouble for the real martial arts divine church. However, during this period of time, the real martial arts divine church started to cause trouble for us. They even started to fight us head-on. It was like they were emboldened by something and no longer feared us. Is that the case?" Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. From what Hall Master Yuan had said, Jian Wushuang had noticed that the real martial arts divine church was acting abnormally because of Jian Wushuang. The Lineage of Stars had the best resources and was one of the most dominant forces in the eternal chaotic world. Which clan dared to make Lineage of Stars their enemies? Even if they suffered losses due to the Lineage of Stars, they would not take it to heart or tolerate these losses quietly. This was especially the case for the enemies of Lineage of Stars, as they were extremely careful not to anger their enemy. The real martial arts divine church did not keep a low profile, but provoked the Lineage of Stars actively. It might have been all right if they had provoked them while Jian Wushuang was in slumber. The reason could have been because they thought Jian Wushuang would not awaken, which would cause Lineage of Stars to lose their greatest asset. However, they had been extremely respectful while Jian Wushuang was in slumber and became more aggressive when Jian Wushuang awakened, to the point they dared to fight lineage of stars head-on. Halt, Master Yuan is right. Where does the real martial arts divine church get their courage from? Jian Wushuang muttered to himself. Within the eternal chaotic world, who dared to go against Jian Wushuang besides Emperor Bai? Even the great emperors did not have the courage to do so. Hall Master Yuan, have you sent experts to investigate this matter? Jian Wushuang asked. Yes. After the most recent fight we had, I sent Emperor God Ling Chu to investigate the matter. Lineage of stars had many almighties and emperor gods. Emperor God Ling Chu was one of them. The leader of the real martial arts divine church died and was a lot weaker compared to before. The number of almighties they have is limited, and they only had one ordinary emperor god. However, after Emperor God Ling Chu reached the territory that the real martial arts divine church controlled, we lost contact. If I am not wrong, Emperor God Ling Chu has already died, Hall Master Yuan said. Oh, before he died, did he send any message back? Jian Wushuang asked. Nope. I only knew that he entered the territory controlled by the real martial arts divine church. Before he could send me any more messages, he died, Hall Master Yuan said, as he shook his head. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes and thought seriously. Emperor gods were one of the most powerful kinds of people within the eternal chaotic world. It was not difficult to kill an emperor god, as many peak emperor gods could do that. But it was not easy to kill one without giving him a chance to transmit a message. Chapter 22:17, Real Martial Arts Divine Church. Looks like something happened within the real martial arts divine church, Jian Wushuang muttered. He had a keen look. This was the reason why I messaged you, Hall Master Yuan said. All right, I will settle this. Disciple, do you have anything important to settle in the short run? Jian Wushuang said. No, He Shou answered. If that is the case, follow me to the territory that the real martial arts divine church controls, Jian Wushuang instructed. Roger, He Shou nodded his head. Soon, Jian Wushuang set off. The real martial arts divine church was located in one of the sanctuaries and occupied a large territory. Before the battle at the Lineage of Stars, the real martial arts divine church had been an overlord in this territory and was one of the strongest clans in the eternal chaotic world. After the battle in the Lineage of Stars, their leader had died, and their overall combat power was far worse compared to before. Even though they were still the most powerful clan on their territory, they were not as dominant anymore. However, within the last 1,000 years, the real martial arts divine church seemed to have recovered. They had become as dominant and overbearing as before. They had even dared to provoke Lineage of Stars. Those clans that tried something funny during the time they were weak were all eliminated. The real martial arts divine church had once again become the overlord of this territory, and no one dared to provoke them. Within the real martial arts divine church, an elder man in white robes was in an independent space somewhere within the group of majestic buildings. The aura from this elder man was of the level of Emperor God. He was the last Emperor God that the real martial arts divine church had. Emperor God Bai Xing was one of the weakest emperor gods in the eternal chaotic world. However, he was still an emperor god, and hence he took over the real martial arts divine church and became its new leader. Church Master. A man in crimson armor appeared beside Emperor God Bai Xing. Have you done the final checks? Emperor Go Bai Xing asked coldly. Yes. There are a total of 12,000 people that come from outside the sanctuary. We have checked that they are virgins under the age of 30. According to the Lord's request, they have never cultivated nor explored the outside world before, the man in crimson armor said. Okay, Emperor God Bai Xing nodded his head as he looked up at a floating island in the sky. many beautiful girls sat on the barren island. They were not cultivators, evident from the fact that they did not radiate any spiritual power. They looked around, confused. They did not know where they were or what was going to happen to them. This batch is good. The Lord should be satisfied. Now, go and prepare the next batch, Emperor God Bai Xing said. Don't worry, Church Master. I have already conquered 10 ancient worlds and commanded them to groom young girls who do not cultivate or venture out to explore the world. Even though it is difficult to have 1 out of 1,000, it should be all right if 10 of these ancient worlds groom at the same time. This can guarantee that we have enough numbers for the next batch 30 years later, the man in blood armor said confidently. That's good. Due to what happened to us back during the Great Battle, we were almost annihilated. Thank God we met the 3 lords. With their help, the real martial arts divine church can return to, or even exceed its former glory. It is even possible to outshine Lineage of Stars and even Green Fire World to become the most powerful clan in the eternal chaotic world. Emperor God Bai Xing nodded his head and said, That's right. The man in crimson armor nodded his head seriously. He was absolutely confident in the 3 lords. Okay, can you take your leave first? I will inform the lords to come over soon. Emperor God Bai Xing said. I shall take my leave, the man in crimson armor said. Emperor God Bai Xing waited for a short while. Whoosh! A middle-aged man in silvery, loose robes appeared. Greetings, my lord. According to your request, I have prepared another batch of 12,000 virgins. Emperor God Bai Xing greeted respectfully. Yes, the middle-aged man nodded his head as he looked up at the island filled with beautiful girls. He stuck out his tongue and gave a bloodthirsty smile. The middle-aged man then flew towards the island. Emperor God Bai Xing turned back towards and left for his independent space. At the same time, he could clearly hear the sad and painful screeches and screams. Emperor God Bai Xing did not hesitate at all as he quickly left the independent space and waited patiently. 7 days later, the middle-aged man in silvery, loose robes walked out of the independent space. When he came out, his robes were blood red. His tongue was still out, licking what remaining blood there was around his lips. He looked hungry for more. It'll come again, after 30 years. The middle-aged man said before he left, See you, my lord. Emperor God Bai Xing watched the middle-aged man leave as he returned to the independent space. The independent space turned into hell. On the island at the center, there was a sea of blood as the dead bodies of girls were stacked up like mountains. Emperor God Bai Xing did not feel bad at all as he commanded people to start cleaning this place up. This was to provide a comfortable environment for the middle-aged when he would return 30 years later. As for the middle-aged man, he returned back to a quiet palace. When he appeared there, a blurry figure appeared from thin air. The middle-aged man looked serious when he saw the consciousness incarnation and greeted, Brother, you went to absorb the blood of virgins, the blurry figure asked. The middle-aged man laughed, embarrassed. Didn't your older brother warn you to stop this addiction? The blurry figure said with a deep voice. Brother, you too know that we were in slumber for so many years. It has been too long since I tasted the splendid virgin blood. I finally managed to awaken. Of course I will take this chance to have a taste, the middle-aged man said. Chapter 22:18 The Bai. After hearing what the middle-aged man had said, the blurry figure fell silent. It was true that they had been in slumber for far too long. It was so long that they themselves had no idea how long they had been in slumber. After the great battle of the ancient past, they had been in slumber. Originally, there had been 5 of them. During the great battle, 2 of them died. Now, only the eldest brother, the second, and the youngest were alive. The youngest of them had a unique addiction. He liked to take in virgin blood. Back in the ancient past, there had been numerous experts. Hence, he had still held back. He only went crazy now because he was in an era in which he did not need to hold back, and he had finally awakened after such a long time. Brother, I will allow you to continue because you just awakened. However, please keep a low profile. The blurry figure reminded. Don't worry. I asked the people from the real martial arts divine church to get those female virgins. There won't be too much commotion as these females aren't cultivators and have no background. The middle-aged man smiled. The blurry figure nodded his head slightly and stopped reprimanding. Oh, yes. Have the real martial arts divine church prepared the resources we need? The blurry figure asked. Yes, they have prepared them all. They are with me. However, these treasures are not of good quality. The middle-aged man brought out a Qian ring and said. The blurry figure scanned the ring, not surprised at all. This era is far different from ours. They are doing well from the fact that they can still find these resources. At least these resources are beneficial to me and our older brother. Even though this era is far worse, there are still many resources out there. The main point is that the real martial arts divine church is too weak and cannot be even considered a top-tier clan. Their means are limited, so of course they cannot get us all the good stuff. It would be a different story if it was Sanctuary Alliance. Brother, I don't understand why we are staying within a mere real martial arts divine church. With our current fighting power, we can forcefully take over Sanctuary Alliance and use their power to find all the resources we need. Would that not be much faster and more efficient? The middle-aged man asked. It's not as easy as you think. Even though the average power level of this era is nothing compared to our era, that is because of restrictions of heaven and earth. We too are under these restrictions, and the maximum fighting power we can have is peak chaotic realm. We might not be strong compared to the top-tier experts in this era. For example, even our older brother is not confident in defeating the strongest two men in this era, Emperor Bai and Sword Emperor. They are just natives of this era. How strong can they be? The middle-aged man said disapprovingly, Do not look down on them. Don't forget Blood Emperor from 20,000 years ago. He was an emperor of the Blood Clan. Even though the Blood Clan had many emperors, those who reached that level are definitely much stronger than me and our older brother. And that Blood Emperor died in the hands of the natives you mentioned, the blurry figure said, Seriously. Furthermore, what we are targeting is heaven's horizon. There is no need for us to provoke the experts from this era. Hence, you should maintain a low profile. Do not blame me for not helping you if you anger a top-tier expert from this era and die in their hands. After the blurry figure said this, he disappeared. The middle-aged man curled his lips, evidence that he did not take what the blurry figure said seriously. On the territory that the real martial arts divine church controlled, in a large town near the headquarters of the real martial arts divine church, Jian Wushuang was in a tavern in the town, drinking wine. He Xiu, who carried a long sword behind his back, appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Master, He Xiu greeted Jian Wushuang respectfully. Don't be so tense. Sit down and relax. Jian Wushuang waved his hands. Yes, He Xiu nodded his head as he sat down in front of Jian Wushuang. How was the search? Jian Wushuang asked. I checked 3 different intel departments. The intel I got was the same. No one saw Emperor God Ling Chu from the lineage of stars. Furthermore, in recent years, there was no battle between any almighties in this territory. However, Emperor God Ling Chu did enter this territory before disappearing, He Xiu said, as he frowned. An expert in the Emperor God realm had gone missing without any commotion at all. It was as though this Emperor God had never set foot here. This meant, it is okay. Since we cannot get any useful intel from these intel departments, let us find the experts from the real martial arts divine church and asked them. Jian Wushuang smiled. Does Master want to confront the real martial arts divine church head-on? He Xiao asked. Confront the real martial arts divine church. I do not know what they have. It is not wise to confront them head-on. Furthermore, if the experts hiding within the real martial arts divine church saw me coming and ran away, what can we do? Jian Wushuang shook his head and said. He Xiao was stunned for a moment before understanding why. There is no need for us to confront them in their headquarters. We can just bait them out. The best case scenario is we force them to use their trump card. Disciple, I shall leave this to you, Jian Wushuang said casually. I understand. He Xiao nodded his head as an idea formed in his head. He Xiao left once again. Meanwhile, Jian Wushuang sat at the window seat in the tar van. He smiled lightly as he drank wine and looked at the scenery outside the window. The town that Jian Wushuang was in was near the real martial arts divine church, hence many of their disciples were gathered there. Many of the top-tier experts and almighties would also appear here. Even now, there was an almighty from the real martial arts divine church here at this town. Within a secret room, many figures gathered here, and the leader was the man in crimson armor. The Lord is satisfied with this batch of virgins. These are your rewards. The man in crimson armor threw a Qiankuan ring to the people in front of him. When the people scanned the ring, they were all pleasantly surprised. The man in crimson armor then said, I have already given you the rewards. Remember, bring the virgins here every 30 years. Do not be negligent. If the Lord is angry, no one can save you. Yes, yes. The figures within the room nodded their heads. Right then, boom. A loud bang was heard as a sword light appeared out of nowhere and sliced the secret room. The ruthless sword light tore everyone apart and killed them instantly. Only the man in crimson armor survived. Chapter 22:19 Reinforcements. Damn it. Seeing the dead bodies around him, the man in crimson armor looked dark. He looked at the man entering the room coldly. Who are you? Lineage of Stars. He Xiao said coldly. You are from Lineage of Stars. The man in crimson armor was first stunned before breaking out in rage. How dare you appear here and kill so many experts from the real martial arts divine church? You speak too much. He Xiao did not want to waste time speaking and attacked. Sword essence turned into a brilliant crimson sword river. The crimson sword river was very attractive. It appeared in front of the man in crimson armor in a flash. So fast, the man in crimson armor was shocked as he instinctively raised the battle blade he was holding to block the attack. Clang! A loud collision was heard as a vast amount of energy exploded beside the right arm of the man in crimson armor. He backed off quickly. How is this possible? We are both in the realm of Sir God, but why is he so much stronger than me? The man in crimson armor was in disbelief as he flipped out a transmission token and requested backup. Seeing this, He Xiao squinted his eyes. He was not angry. Instead, he was elated. He wanted the man in crimson to ask for help. Die! He Xiao roared as he continued to attack. A continuous stream of sword essence completely suppressed the man in crimson armor. These two Sir Gods started to battle it out at the center of the town. The peaceful town became noisy as the two started to battle. A large amount of cultivators rose to the air to watch the battle. This is a battle between almighties. I recognized the man using the battle blade. He is Sir God Mo Chio from the Real Martial Arts Divine Church. I don't recognize the other man. However, he is very powerful as he can completely suppress Sir God Mo Chio. Real Martial Arts Divine Church's headquarters is right around the corner. He dares to attack Sir God Mo Chio here? The experts from Real Martial Arts Divine Church should be on their way. Many of the cultivators chattered. Many of the cultivators from the Tarvan walked out to watch the battle. Jian Wushuang was the only one who sat there, smiling, holding a winning trophy in his hand. Even though he was not looking at the battlefield, his soul power encompassed the entire area and he could see everything clearly. Ha! His sword skills have improved greatly over these years. Jian Wushuang smiled lightly. He knew clearly that He Xiu was definitely a top-tier Sir God and could put up a fight against Emperor Gods. As for Sir God Mo Qiu, he was just an ordinary Sir God. By rights, He Xiu could have killed him easily. Of course, He Xiu was holding back and had intentionally suppressed Sir God Mo Qiu. His purpose was simple: attract more experts from the Real Martial Arts Divine Church to come over. Emperor God Baixing, who was within the Real Martial Arts Divine Church, had received the message from Sir God Mo Qiu. He Xiu from the lineage of stars came to the territory controlled by the Real Martial Arts Divine Church and is fighting Mo Qiu right now. Emperor God Baixing squinted his eyes as he had a cold look. Humph! I knew that lineage of stars would definitely do something when Emperor God Ling Chu disappeared in my territory. I did not expect them to come so quickly. Church Master, I have heard of He Xiu. Apparently, he is a lineal disciple of the Sword Emperor and has great fighting power. Even though he is only in the realm of Sir God, he can go head-to-head with Emperor Gods. With his fighting power, Mo Qiu should be in a bad spot. We should go and reinforce him quickly. A Sir God said, "Of course we will go and reinforce him." However, the lineage of stars must have some trump cards if they dare to come all the way here. He Xiu will not be the only expert. There will definitely be other experts hidden somewhere, Emperor God said in a low voice. This is what we will do. The few of you will go and reinforce Mo Qiu immediately. Bring along 2 blood slaves with you. If you run into trouble, let these 2 blood slaves go and settle it. If they can't, message me, and I will ask the Lord to help us. Yes. The few Sir Gods nodded their heads solemnly and set off. He Xiu and Mo Qiu were still fighting in the large town. Naturally, Sir God Mo Qiu kept retreating. Right when Sir God Mo Qiu could not take it anymore, 3 figures appeared in the distance. How dare you, He Xiu? Humph! Even if you are from the lineage of stars, we will not let you leave easily when you murder someone within the Real Martial Arts Divine Church territory. 2 yells were heard. The surrounding cultivators heard the 2 yells, and they understood why He Xiu dared to attack. So that man is from the lineage of stars. No wonder he dared to attack. I heard that the lineage of stars and the Real Martial Arts Divine Church were enemies. While the spectators were exclaiming, the 3 Sir Gods linked up with Mo Qiu as they looked at He Xiu angrily. Is that all that came? He Xiu face darkened. The few of us are more than enough to take care of you. Attack now, suppress him. Then ask his master, the Sword Emperor, to come personally to collect him. One of the Sir Gods said. There was an uproar from everyone in the town. Suppress He Xiu, then ask the Sword Emperor personally to get him within the eternal chaotic world. Those who were educated all knew who the Sword Emperor was. He was one of the most powerful men within the eternal chaotic world. A mere Real Martial Arts Divine Church was not qualified for the Sword Emperor to come down personally. Ha! His tone is really demanding. Jian Wushuang smiled lightly. At the center of the town, He Xiu started fighting against the 4 Sir Gods from the Real Martial Arts Divine Church. Even though he had been fighting for alone, he was not afraid at all. He no longer held back and fought with all his might. He had fought 4 Sir Gods and was still at an advantage. He Xiu flicked his sword up as a ghostly sword light pierced the chest of one of the Sir Gods. There was a large wound on his chest. He was severely injured. The four Sir Gods were already at a disadvantage. With one of them getting injured, their disadvantage in battle grew bigger. Chapter 22, 20 Blood Slave. This Hishio is definitely the lineal disciple of the Sword Emperor. He is extremely powerful. If this continues, the four of us might be defeated by him. The more the four Sir Gods from the real martial arts divine church fought, the more surprised they were at Hishio's battle power. We have no choice. Use the blood slaves, one of the Sir God said coldly. The other three nodded their heads in approval. The Sir God waved his hands as two figures which radiated enormous amounts of blood chi appeared in the sky above. Hishio focused his eyes before staring at one of the figures. He was looking at a pale, weak, and skinny elder man. The aura this man radiated was at the level of Emperor God Ling Chu. Hishio was shocked. This weak and elder man was Emperor God Ling Chu from Lineage of Stars. He was the one who had gone missing after reaching this place. No one had expected him to appear so suddenly. Even though his aura was still at the level of an Emperor God, the vibes he had were completely different. What happened? What did you do to Emperor God Ling Chu? Hishio asked. What happened to him? We just made him into a blood slave. Don't worry, you will become like him soon. The Sir Gods from the real martial arts divine church laughed. Hishio looked dark. He could see that Emperor God Ling Chu and the other peak Sir God had lost their own consciousness and were staring at him in a hostile manner. In the Tarvan far away, are they under soul control? Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes as he studied the two figures who radiated large amounts of blood chi. No, even if they are under soul control, their vitality signs would be there, and the vibes they give would be like any other humans. However, these two people here have no vitality signs at all. It is as though they are battle puppets. Battle puppets. Jian Wushuang had already realized that Emperor God Ling Chu and the other peak Sir God had been made into battle puppets using certain weird techniques. To forcefully make an Emperor God into a battle puppet was much more cruel than soul control. Looks like my deductions are right. There are people supporting them, and these people come from. Jian Wushuang started to think to himself. On the battlefield, blood slave, kill him. The Sir God from the real martial arts divine church ordered. The two blood slaves did not hesitate and attacked Hishio. One of the battle puppets was an Emperor God, while the other was a peak Sir God. This was a much more powerful lineup compared to the four Sir Gods from the real martial arts divine church. Emperor God Ling Chu was already very powerful among the Emperor Gods. After he had become a blood slave, his battle power had become one level higher, and he could put heavy pressure on Hishio. I cannot fend off Emperor God Ling Chu alone. Hishio knew this clearly. Hence, when Emperor God Ling Chu moved, he waved his hands and summoned four figures who were in gray armor. These four figures were four silver armor Dao soldiers. Jian Wushuang deliberately told Hishio to bring these Dao soldiers along before they set off. Any one of the four silver armor Dao soldiers had the power of an ordinary Emperor God, though they lacked fighting techniques. However, four of such Dao soldiers could still stop Emperor God Ling Chu easily. As long as Emperor God Ling Chu was stopped, Hishio could take care of the last peak Sir God easily. The battle continued at the center of the town. It became increasingly fierce. Initially, the four Sir Gods were pleased when they had just brought out the blood slave. However, that changed when they saw that Hishio had deployed the four Dao soldiers, which had stopped Emperor God Ling Chu. Hishio brought four silver armor Dao soldiers. This is troublesome. With the four silver armor Dao soldiers, there is nothing we can do even if we have two blood slaves. Quick, update what happened here to the church master. Let him make the decision. The four Sir Gods messaged Emperor God by Xing immediately within the headquarters of the real martial arts divine church. As expected, things are not so simple. We only know that He Xiu has 4 Dao silver armor Dao soldiers. If I am not wrong, there are other experts hiding in the dark, or he has other tricks up his sleeves. Emperor God by Xing was not surprised when he received the message. There is nothing the 2 blood slaves and Mo Chiu and friends can do in this situation. Even if I was there, the experts from Lineage of Stars would intercept me. If this is the case, I shall ask the lords for help. Emperor God by Xing no longer hesitated and went to look for the lords immediately within one of the quiet palaces. Lord, Emperor God by Xing stood respectfully in front of the middle-aged man in silvery, loose robes. What is the matter? The middle-aged man raised his head and looked at Emperor God by Xing. His attitude was extremely cold. Emperor God by Xing was only an emperor god. Back in the ancient past, he had just been an ordinary expert in the middle stage chaotic realm. The middle-aged man would not take him seriously. The middle-aged man would not even take the entire real martial arts divine church. If not for his special addiction to virgin blood and his elder brothers needing resources, he would not have had any interactions with the real martial arts divine church. Lord, previously, you made Emperor God Ling Chu into a blood slave. The clan he was from, Lineage of Stars, sent experts here. They are now at one of the towns outside of the real martial arts divine church and are fighting with the experts from our church. They might not be able to hold on for long. Emperor God by Xing said carefully. The middle-aged man had a calm manner. The real martial arts divine church did search for certain resources under the command of him and his 2 brothers. He knew that the method that the church had used would definitely provoke other clans. Hence, they had agreed that they would help if the church encountered any problems. When Emperor God Ling Chu first reached the territory belonging to the real martial arts divine church, the middle-aged man settled him personally. This is quite annoying. How many people did Lineage of Stars send? And what realms are they in? The middle-aged man asked casually. From what we know, they only sent 1 Sir God named He Xiu. Emperor God by Xing said, "This is ridiculous. You ask me to help you to deal with a Sir God. Are the people from the real martial arts divine church all useless?" The middle-aged man roared in anger. Lord, please calm down. Even though he is a Sir God, he is a genius. His fighting power is that of an ordinary emperor god. Furthermore, he brought along 4 silver armor Dao soldiers. Emperor God by Xing quickly explained. Chapter 22-21 The backing of real martial arts divine church. All almighties from the real martial arts divine church have surfaced except me, and even brought your 2 blood slaves, but still we are no match against He Xiu. The Lineage of Stars may still have other experts hidden in the dark. I come to you with no other choice. Emperor God by Xing said respectfully, "Is that so?" The middle-aged man raised his eyebrows. "If that is the case, let me follow you. Well, turn that He Xiu into a blood slave as well." "Thank you, my lord." Emperor God by Xing was elated and said, "I wonder if the other 2 lords are free to follow as well." HNGH, the middle-aged man sneered. "My 2 elder brothers are busy restoring their pinnacle fighting power. They don't have time for this. The Lineage of Stars do not need my elder brothers to appear. I can do it myself." The middle-aged man was not impressed. Emperor God by Xing's gaze moved. Indeed, unless the Sword Emperor himself came down personally, no one could stop the middle-aged man. Even if the Sword Emperor himself came down, he may not even become a worthy opponent. Emperor God by Xing did not hesitate any longer and brought the middle-aged man towards the city. A fierce battle was ongoing within the huge city. There were more and more cultivators in the city staring at that one battle. For a normal cultivator, it was rare to witness battles with so many almighties. Many even recorded it with a mirroring token. While the others were attracted by the battle, Jian Wushuang was still drinking aimlessly in that tavern, unbothered by what was happening outside. Suddenly, Jian Wushuang's gaze moved. Is he here? His soul power could sense an expert was approaching. Indeed, a figure emerged from a void far away and appeared in the middle of the city, in front of all the cultivators. Leader! The four Sir Gods of the real martial arts divine church were delighted. Is Emperor God Bai Xing, the leader of the real martial arts divine church, has finally appeared. The surrounding cultivators all recognized Emperor God Bai Xing. He Xiao stared at Emperor God Bai Xing as well. Only Jian Wushuang paid no heed to Emperor God Bai Xing, but focused on another direction instead. Sealing off space-time directly? A clever space-time seal method as well. Simply laying it down feels enough to block normal Great Emperor's transmissions. Jian Wushuang sneered. With such methods, it was no wonder Great Emperors were unable to transmit. Like Emperor God Ling Chu, after sealing off the space-time, a figure gradually appeared in the void. It was a middle-aged man in a loose silver robe. His aura was strange. It felt like an ordinary almighty, but it was definitely more than that. Bai Xing, there are too many people here. The middle-aged man looked around with his cold eyes. Please take down He Xiao freely. I will handle the rest. Emperor God Bai Xing smiled. He knew what the middle-aged man meant. He did not want too much attention from the experts of that era, instructed by his two elder brothers. Like the last time they had handled Emperor God Ling Chu, they had handled it properly and at a remote location, nothing had got out. But now they were in a large city in front of so many cultivators. To make sure news did not spread, the real martial arts divine church could only be crueler. I need to handle him. The middle-aged man looked over He Xiao, like looking down on an ant. He Xiao felt shivers running down his spine, being targeted by that middle-aged man. He had to control his trembles. He's so strong. Too strong. He Xiao clenched his teeth, but showed no signs of fear. After all, he was not alone. He had someone covering his back. So what if the person was strong? He could not possibly be stronger than Master, right? He Xiao, you must not be the only one from Lineage of Stars this time. Call out to all your experts behind you. Emperor God Bai Xing laughed. He was confident with the middle-aged man behind him. At that moment, Jian Wushuang, who was drinking beside the window in the tavern, disappeared. In a moment, he appeared beside He Xiao. Are you the backing behind the real martial arts divine church? A faint voice resonated. Everyone was attracted by the voice and had their eyes on the young man beside He Xiao. The man was in a red robe and stood there casually. The aura of all the experts around were completely suppressed. The entire city became peaceful. This strange scene turned the faces of everyone around. Emperor God Bai Xing of the real martial arts divine church, and the few Sir Gods had their eyes dead on Jian Wushuang. Their eyes were virtually popping out of their sockets. Sword Emperor. A terrifying scream came out from Sir God Mo Chiao. Sir God Mo Chiao felt his head almost exploding. He had only fear within him. Unprecedented fear. Dreadful fear. This scream made the people present understand the identity of this person. They all turned fanatical. Sword Emperor. The Sword Emperor himself. Leader of the Lineage of Stars, the highest leader of the eternal chaotic world, the strongest in the eternal chaotic world. The legendary Sword Emperor appears in front of us. I'm not dreaming, am I? The countless cultivators were all dumbfounded. Some almost slapped themselves to make sure it was not a dream. The leader of the eternal chaotic world, Sword Emperor, had arrived. Chapter 22:22 Xiegu Sword Emperor. The Emperor God by Xing stared at the young man in front of him, full of fear. He was the leader of the real martial arts divine church. He knew how terrifying Sword Emperor was. The Sword Emperor was the recognized leader of the eternal chaotic world. No one could surpass him. But he also knew that Jian Wushuang had slaughtered his way to the top. His fame was built on the blood of others. Notorious, he had not expected the Sword Emperor to arrive personally. Naturally, he was shocked. The only person that did not fear Jian Wushuang was that middle-aged man. You are that Sword Emperor? The middle-aged man looked at Jian Wushuang lazily. I hear you're the strongest cultivator in this era next to Emperor Bai, but you don't seem like much. He did not take Jian Wushuang to heart at all. That was normal. He was from the ancient era. For experts from that era, the highest experts of the new era were only peak chaotic realm, nothing in comparison to their era. After hearing that, Emperor God by Xing calmed down. So what if you're the Sword Emperor? How could you compete against our ancient era lords? Emperor God by Xing thought to himself. Jian Wushuang glanced at the middle-aged man. From the ancient era, Jian Wushuang had long ago guessed the latter's identity. In that era, besides Emperor Bai, no one could have doubted him. If the real martial arts divine church provoked lineage of stars because they had the backing of this middle-aged man, then he must have been from the ancient era to give the church such a confidence boost. Emperor God by Xing, your backing is only this? Jian Wushuang swept at him. HNGH, Sword Emperor, you are scary, but only in this era. With Lord Xiegu from the ancient era, you can forget about escaping. Emperor God by Xing said. Xiegu was the middle-aged man's name. Is it? Jian Wushuang's lips curled. Thanks. My second brother had instructed me not to clash with experts from this era, but you came to my doorstep yourself. You can't blame me. Xiegu was smiling deviously, now with a red dagger in his hand. The crimson dagger exuded a cold glaze under the sun that made one shiver. It would be interesting if I killed you and made you my blood servant. Xiegu smiled and made his move. Xiao. A red shadow zoomed past in the void. No one could fix their gaze on Xiegu so fast. The cultivators were all astonished. Careful, master, even Xiao warned him. He too felt that Xiegu was too fast. But Jian Wushuang stood there, not moving a single muscle. Wang. A crimson light tore through the void and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang, without a trace. The crimson figure was going straight for Jian Wushuang's throat. Xiegu had a devious smile on him. Die-ent. The dagger was getting closer to his throat. The surrounding crowd held their breaths. As the crimson light was about to pierce Jian Wushuang's throat, a large hand grabbed it. Pap! The hand exuded surging divine power and stopped the crimson dagger with his own bare hands. In the void, Jian Wushuang remained standing, Xiegu about a meter away from him. His crimson dagger was being held tightly by Jian Wushuang, like a large plier. No matter what Xiegu did, the dagger would not move forward. How is that possible? Yes, eyes glared in astonishment. The dagger was a formidable chaos divine treasure, and he had given everything he had in that blow. But Jian Wushuang had caught it with his bare hands. He was an ancient era expert. Even though he was restricted by the rules of heaven and earth, he had so many secret skills experts of the current era could only dream of. He was confident no cultivator of the current era could be his opponent. His two elder brothers had their reservations towards Emperor Bai, but he had always dismissed those fears. But now, it was beyond what he had expected. How could he actually catch my dagger? How is that possible? Xiegu mumbled. As he was in such shock, Jian Wushuang in front of him was staring coldly at him, his gaze full of ridicule and disdain. expert from the ancient era. I wondered how strong could you be, but in the end, you're nothing more than an ordinary third stage Great Emperor. Jian Wushuang chuckled. As Xie made his move, Jian Wushuang felt it. Nothing more than an ordinary third stage Great Emperor. For comparison, his abilities were alike to Demon King Chunyu. That level of power would have posed a threat towards him if they were fighting 20,000 years ago, before the war. But Jian Wushuang could not care anymore. He caught Xie's blow with his divine power alone. If your abilities are only as such, you will not leave this place today. Jian Wushuang's voice was indifferent. He placed his strength into his right fist, returning a terrifying blow as he knocked Xie's dagger away. That fist encompassed Jian Wushuang's divine power from the ultimate phase of the seventh step inverse cultivation, the bloodline power from the ancient god clan, and the improved divine power from the immemorial celestial Bodhi's second scroll. All of that combined was heading on its way towards Xie. Chapter 22-23, Thunder-like Suppression Home. That punch split the earth. A large hole that permeated the entire city came out of thin air. That horrifying, earth-shattering blow was heading towards Xie. The sheer power alone took everyone around aback. Xie's face darkened, and he threw a punch out consciously, trying to resist. But as the fists collided head-on, there was a bang. Then there was the sound of crackling of bones. Xie's entire arm had been blasted away from the sheer power, and he spat out a large mouthful of blood. This level of power, chaotic divine demon. Xie was terrified. Impossible. Are there no restrictions placed upon this earth? Everyone can only reach chaotic realm powers. Sword Emperor, how can he do that? Impossible. Xie was being torn apart. He did not know that the restrictions were only placed upon typical cultivators, and did not affect inverse cultivators. When Emperor Bai had given his all during the final fight against the three Emperors' world, along with the secret skills of Star Palace amplifying his powers tenfold, he could have reached chaotic divine demon levels. But Jian Wushuang's fighting power now was stronger than Emperor Bai's. Emperor Bai needed the secret skills of Star Palace to reach chaotic divine demon levels. But for Jian Wushuang, with the ultimate phase of the inverse cultivation's seventh step mastered bloodline power and immemorial celestial body, he could hit chaotic divine demon levels even without secret skills of Star Palace. Jian Wushuang could crush Xie with pure power alone. That left Xie no room to even struggle against Jian Wushuang. Run! Xie finally got his act together, or perhaps Jian Wushuang's power had frightened him, grabbing his dagger with his bare hands, then releasing chaotic divine demon powers in a single punch. How could he block that when he could only perform pinnacle chaotic realm powers himself? He had to run. Don't think you can escape. Jian Wushuang glanced coldly at Xie and leapt over casually. The leap seemed casual, but it contained the power of space-time, making him endlessly faster than the speed at which Xie could escape. Immediately he caught up with Xie. He has rules of order. Xie glared, but Jian Wushuang had already pulled out his Blood Mountain sword and directly threw it up in the air, turning it into a large mountain. The bottom of the mountain had streaks of mysterious lines, forming a large black hole in an attempt to suck in Xie. Suppressing me? Dream on. Xie was enraged and started to struggle in a frenzy. Struggle? What's the use of that? Jian Wushuang could only sneer. The suppressive abilities of the Blood Mountain sword increased in proportion with Jian Wushuang's own abilities. To activate the suppression, divine power had to be used, with Jian Wushuang's divine power being fully released to chaotic divine demon levels. How could the chaotic realm, Xie, you possibly have blocked his suppression? No. Xie could only scream as his body approached the black hole. Brothers, Save me! Xiaoyu screamed as he transmitted his call for help to his brothers. After that, he was fully absorbed by the black hole. The large mountain reverted back to the Blood Mountain sword once again and landed in Jian Wushuang's hand. Jian Wushuang remained indifferent, as if he had simply suppressed a normal man instead of an ancient-era expert. His heart did not flutter at all. Indeed, an ancient era that could only demonstrate the third stage great emperor powers no longer excited him anymore. He could suppress or kill them with a flip of his hand. But it looked completely different in front of all the cultivators. This Emperor God Bai Xing of the real martial arts divine church was dumbfounded. His eyes were almost falling out of their sockets. Sir God Mo Chiu and the rest were equally shocked. Perhaps the other cultivators could not feel much, for they do not know much about Xia Ye's background anyway. But Emperor God Bai Xing and the other Sir Gods knew that Xiaoyu was an ancient-era expert. An ancient-era expert had been so easily suppressed. How could that happen? Emperor God Bai Xing was on the verge of collapse, but he came to his senses before long. Run! Emperor God Bai Xing led the escape. The other Sir Gods from the real martial arts divine church were not slow either, and all started running away. If even Lord Xiaoyu could be so easily suppressed, none of them would stand a chance against Jian Wushuang. Emperor God Bai Xing was only thinking of returning to real martial arts divine church and getting Xia Ye's brothers to appear. He knew that the brothers were much stronger. Perhaps they stood a chance together against Jian Wushuang. As Emperor God Bai Xing and the rest were escaping, Jian Wushuang was still indifferent, not moving an inch. It was as if he was about to let them go. But not long after, a mysterious attack quietly struck the five of them. A trace of terror flashed across the eyes of the five of them. The next moment, 5 corpses were plunging straight for the ground. Dead, the leader of the real martial arts divine church, and his 4 almighties, all dead. How are they dead? The Sword Emperor did not move at all. If I'm not wrong, he used a soul attack. The surrounding cultivators were in awe, looking at Jian Wushuang in respect. Jian Wushuang remained indifferent. Soul attack. Indeed, that was what he did. Chapter 22-24 apologizing. My disciple, go pick up their treasures, Jian Wushuang instructed. Understood. He Xiu immediately took the treasures and the Qiankuan rings of Emperor God Bai Xing and the others. He Xiu returned to Jian Wushuang. Master, do we still make our way towards the real martial arts divine church? No need for that. Jian Wushuang smiled. Xiaoyu mentioned his 2 brothers just now. Now that I have suppressed him, his brothers will definitely come for him. We just need to wait. Understood. He Xiu nodded. At that moment, within the real martial arts divine Chicha's lair, 2 figures were cultivating in separate rooms within a secluded palace. Suddenly, Xia Ye's transmission came over. Both of them in the room opened their eyes immediately. Number 5. Xiu. 2 figures immediately appeared within the palace. The soul power of both started to cover the entire real martial arts divine church. Number 5's not here, along with the church leader and his chaotic realm disciples. A black-haired man with a black mark on his forehead said. Immediately they caught a senior from the real martial arts divine church and got hold of the story. Lineage of Star? Number 5's in trouble. Let's go. The both of them then made their way to the city that Jian Wushuang was held up in. Within the huge city, countless cultivators gathered and stared in awe and fear towards the figure about the central void. Jian Wushuang had his hands crossed and was stood there casually, but his soul power was already spreading. Jian Wushuang immediately sensed 2 strong auras within his soul power radius. They're here. Jian Wushuang looked towards the void in front of him. The countless cultivators around followed Jian Wushuang's gaze and looked towards the void. At the edge of the void, two black dots appeared and were enlarging at an alarming rate. Finally, the two figures appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. One was in a black robe, black-haired, with a black mark on his forehead. He stood there, releasing no aura at all. The other man was red-haired, in a red robe, with a fire mark on his forehead, exuding violent and hot aura. It felt like a burning flame. They took a glance at everyone around. Both of them also noticed Jian Wushuang. "Number 5, where is he?" The burly man with the flame mark shouted. "Number 5. If you are talking about Xieyu, he's now suppressed," Jian Wushuang replied. "Suppressed? You dare suppress my brother?" The burly man was enraged, flames coming out from his eyes. There was no obvious fire, but everyone around could feel the heat and flames on them like they were being cooked alive. "Retreat, let's move further away." The surrounding cultivators had to move to the edge of the city to escape from that fiery aura. So what if I did? Jian Wushuang had no fear. The nerve! The burly man was about to make his move. "Brother, no rush!" The black-haired young man stopped him. The black-haired man was obviously calmer than the burly man. He exhaled lightly and looked towards Jian Wushuang. "You are from the lineage of stars and able to suppress our number 5. I assume you are the great sword emperor of this era." "Yes, it is I." Jian Wushuang nodded, acknowledging it. "Sword emperor, I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding. The three of us only wish to cultivate and restore our peak strength. We had no intention of making enemies with the lineage of stars," the black-haired man said. "No intention? But you have already done it," Jian Wushuang replied coldly. "That is the act of the real martial arts divine church, I assume. We had no intention of offending you or any other expert of this era. We hope you can forgive our brother, and we will be willing to compensate you for the trouble we've caused for your lineage of stars." The black-haired man was sincere. "Apologize? Compensate? Haha, if I'm not wrong, those two blood slaves are the work of your brother, right?" Jian Wushuang pointed towards the two blood slaves. The black-haired man's face darkened at the sight of them. Blood slaves were indeed one of Xieye's favorite pastimes. In the ancient era, he loved turning live cultivators into blood slaves. One of the blood slaves belonged to the lineage of stars. Jian Wushuang said coldly, "Your brother ruthlessly killed my lineage of stars expert and turned him into a blood slave. Before you arrived, he made his move against me as well. If not for my skills, I'm afraid I would have been turned into a blood slave as well." The black-haired man's face darkened with resentment. He had instructed Xieyu many times to not act wantonly, but it seemed that Xieyu obviously did not want to listen to him. "Your Excellency, regardless of whether he is my brother, this issue will be put to an end if you release my brother. I will promise to never offend the lineage of stars, but if you insist on not releasing my brother," the black-haired man's voice deepened. "So what if I'm not willing to release? Will you learn from your brother and turn me to a blood slave as well?" Jian Wushuang sniggered. "Looks like there is no longer room for negotiation." The black-haired man's eyes turned cold. The burly man beside him sneered. "Number 2, why waste time with words? Just kill him already." The flame and heat immediately encompassed the entire city, burning the void. Many buildings, and even the ground below, succumbed to the sea of fire. Immediately, the city's buildings were burned to ash. Chapter 22-25. It begins, my gosh. Luckily, we retreated far away. If not, too terrifying. The huge city disappeared in a blink of an eye. The many cultivators that had retreated to the edges of the city were horrified as they watched the sea of fire sweep over the city. In the middle of that sea of fire, the burly man, now with a flaming axe, was the lord within the sea of fire. To the side, the black-haired man took out a black spear, his entire being looking as though it had morphed into a black hole that devoured everything. The auras of both of them reached their maximum. This aura feels like pinnacle third stage, stronger than Lord Fin, but not Kaiser blood levels. Jian Wushuang's lips were raised. He was referring to Kaiser blood Emperor's consciousness embodiment. The consciousness embodiment Kaiser blood was already at pinnacle third stage, yet Emperor Bai could easily suppress him. These two people were not even at Kaiser blood's level. Sword Emperor, for the last time, will you let go of Xie? The black-haired man's voice became cold. Nope. Jian Wushuang gently shook his head. You want to die? The black-haired man's face darkened. Kill him already. The burly man was extremely bloodthirsty, and without hesitation, both experts made their moves. The two great ancient era experts had not much intention to clash with experts of the current era. Their intentions were much simpler. They simply wanted to restore their strength peacefully, and once the time was up, head for heaven's horizon. But not wanting to clash with the current era's experts did not mean that they feared them. At least they did not fear Jian Wushuang. From the information they had received, the scariest expert around was Emperor Bai and Jian Wushuang, even though he had been critical in the fight between the three emperors world 20,000 years ago. Jian Wushuang had been able to release such power due to his trump card, and it would be hard to use it again. Jian Wushuang's true power seemed to be at pinnacle chaotic realm in their opinion, nothing more than an ordinary third stage great emperor. But their fighting power were both pinnacle third stage. If they teamed up, they could even fight Emperor Bai. What was a Sword Emperor going to do to stop them? I gave you a chance. Don't blame us, the black-haired man shouted and appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. A terrifying dark aura came bursting out as his black spear pierced forward. Howl! A dragon's cry resonated. A huge dark dragon appeared, circling around that spear, while that eerie spear was sparkling in front of the chest of Jian Wushuang. The horrifying speed and explosive power of that spear seemed menacing. Yet Jian Wushuang had no intention of dodging. The next moment, the black spear went straight through his body, but no flesh or blood could be seen. Jian Wushuang's body gradually turned into nothing. What? The black-haired man's face darkened, immediately locking eyes with Jian Wushuang at the void, not far away. That was fast. That kid actually got a bit of space-time rules, and he knows how to use it well. The black-haired man was shocked. What he did not know was that Jian Wushuang had practiced in the tower for 1,000 years. While practicing with the experts, he had mastered both swordsmanship and rules of order. Thousands of years of slaughter had improved his swordsmanship and his rules of order. He had dodged the spear with space-time rules of order. Die! The monstrous voice could be heard everywhere. The burly man with the flaming axe struck down at Jian Wushuang's side. But before the axe could come down, the rising heat could have been felt first. If it had been any ordinary expert or even a great emperor, the heat alone would have stopped breaths and made them lose all ability to resist. But Jian Wushuang was not affected by it all, and threw a punch. Pung! The huge axe and fist crashed head-on. Based on how sharp the axe was, it should have cut off Jian Wushuang's entire hand. But in fact, Jian Wushuang's hand was not affected at all, and the power of his hand even passed on towards the burly man. The burly man could feel a sharp pain in his arm. That power. Shocked, the burly man retreated. And soon the sea of fire started retreating. The man was now covered by the burning flames. Like a flaming giant, he raised his axe again. Flaming axe. Hua, hua, hua. 3 axe strikes were made, every move coming with boundless flame. HNGH. Jian Wushuang snorted without fear and threw out 3 punches with his right fist. Pung, pung, pung. 3 explosions then followed the retreating body of the burly man. After a while, he composed himself. Damn it, the restrictions on this earth are too strong. I threw 13 axe blows at him, but only the weakest 3 came out. If I could throw my 6th axe out, I would definitely cut the dude in 2, the burly man growled. He was dejected. As an ancient era expert, chaotic realm powers had been nothing to him in the past, but now he could only demonstrate chaotic realm powers himself. It never felt good to be restricted so tightly. Xiao, the black-haired man, appeared beside the burly man. Watch out, Sword Emperor is stronger than we thought. Black-haired man. I know, the burly man nodded, and his face stiffened. Jian Wushuang watched the 2 people regather, and a smile was on his face. Both of you are not bad, much better than Xieyu, worthy for me to pull out my sword. Under that devious smile, the Blood Mountain sword showed in his hand once again. The sword was out. He was finally getting serious. Chapter 22-26 execution from his appearance to taking down Xieyu to the previous attacks. Jian Wushuang had never pulled out his Blood Mountain sword for swordsmanship. At most, he had used the Blood Mountain sword's suppressive abilities to suppress Xieyu. Now, finally, Jian Wushuang was about to perform his sword skills. His abilities were finally being revealed. Brother, I have a bad hunch about this. Be careful. The black-haired man stared at Jian Wushuang and said, The burly man nodded. Jian Wushuang in front of them finally made his move. A casual step, yet it contained endless power of space-time, and he appeared in front of the burly man. Jian Wushuang casually swung his sword, like a child playing with a wooden stick. It was soft, there was no strength to it at all. It looked ordinary to the people watching, and rightfully so. It was indeed a very ordinary, casual sword move. But such a casual sword move can be drastically different in nature when done by Jian Wushuang. Space could not hinder his sword at all. The burly man's face darkened, but he dared not be reckless. He took his fiery axe and swung down, the endless sea of fire charging for the sword. Dang! It was a crisp sound. Jian Wushuang's arm shook slightly, pulling back his Blood Mountain sword. He twisted his wrist and held his sword horizontally, the body of the sword now forming a whip which was heading towards the burly man. Jian Wushuang had trained in the Sword Doctrine Trial Tower for a millennium. He had achieved a new understanding of sword principle. Now, his usage of swordsmanship was unpreceded. To him now, not only the blade could be used to kill the enemy, the body, the handle, any part of the sword can be used. The Blood Mountain sword left a blood shadow in the void and struck the burly man's axe. An overbearing power was passed over, enough for the burly man to grunt, almost causing him to let go of his axe. After the sword move forced the burly man into a retreat, he could feel several wind-breaking sounds heading for him. It was the black-haired man with his spear. His spear was as fast as a viper coming out of its hole, heading for Jian Wushuang's head. Jian Wushuang smiled. As he raised his Blood Mountain sword, Jian Wushuang turned into a huge beast that could devour everything in its way. The beast was roaring as an overwhelming explosion of swordsmanship burst out. Jian Wushuang held the sword with one hand and pierced it straight forward. Instantly the huge beast pounced, and dense, endless sword shadows decimated the black-haired man's spear tactics. The black-haired man's face darkened and started to spin the spear like a fiery wheel. Pap, pap, dang, dang. Continuous clashes were heard. The dense, endless sword shadows were all blocked by the black-haired man's spear. The wild beast slowly disappeared. But after it had disappeared, a figure took its place and appeared less than 10 meters in front of him. Crap, the black-haired man was shocked. A scarlet sword light appeared in front of the youth's chest, tearing through his defensive armor, crushing all his internal organs. Sword Principal Xian, Luo, Sanguis Extremis style. The black-haired man's eyes dimmed before he could scream. Second brother. The burly man broke down immediately upon that sight. Ah! The burly man let out a hysterical howl, his expression wild. Faced with such endless rage, the sea of fire he was surrounded in turned crimson red. The fiery mark between his eyebrows let out a dazzling light as well, and immediately mysterious patterns emerged from the mark and surrounded his body. Covered by those mysterious patterns, the burly man looked savage. You will die for what you have done. The burly man looked at Jian Wushuang with murderous intent and strode over. Hung long long. An overwhelming aura had locked onto Jian Wushuang. He became stronger. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. I guess he demonstrated some sort of secret skill at a very high cost, his powers bursting out to be almost half-step divine demon levels. Shouldn't be that easy here with the restrictions. Jian Wushuang was right. The burly man had indeed performed a powerful secret skill, but its side effects are astonishing. Most importantly, he could only keep it up for 3 breaths. 3 breaths was the limit. Even with your secret skill, you only reached half-step divine demon. Jian Wushuang smiled. As the burly man charged at him in a frenzy, Jian Wushuang greeted him directly without fear. Flaming axe. Hua, 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 hua. 5 axe shadows, each one cutting down with endless flame. It was the same stunt, but this time he barely managed to perform 5 axe moves. But 5 was his limit. Jian Wushuang held the sword with one hand, and as the axe was coming for him, a sharp light flashed across his eyes. Hu! A wind strong enough to destroy everything around came. The storm could tear great emperor experts apart, but the storm was the beginning of Jian Wushuang's sword move. Like a storm, it was Sword Principal Xian Luo's most powerful move, Blast Rainstorm. As Jian Wushuang's swordsmanship improved, the power of the Sword Principal Xian Luo started to surface as well, along with Jian Wushuang's current chaotic divine demon power. Hua! The sword light flashed past mercilessly. The sea of fire was cut into 2. As for the 5 axe shadows, under the sword light, pung, 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 there were 5 impacts, and the burly man's battle axe was thrown away. How is this possible? The burly man's eyes were wide open in astonishment, but the sword light was already in front of him, the endless storms flooding around him. Chapter 22-27. Control. The endless storm soon came to a rest. The fire that swallowed the entire city has gradually dissipated as well. The peace of the earth was restored. At the center of the earth, Jian Wushuang put his blood mountain sword in his Qian Kuan ring, gazing at the 2 corpses below him. 2 ancient era experts. Indeed, your powers were way stronger than they were in the ancient era. I can take you all down because you were not able to perform pinnacle powers. But because of this, it shows that you no longer dominate this era, Jian Wushuang murmured. He had no pity for the 2 corpses. Perhaps the 2 ancient era experts truly had no intention of provoking the top powerhouses of the era. They indeed had no intention to provoke Jian Wushuang either. But what they did could not be tolerated by Jian Wushuang. They had turned a pinnacle Sir God, and even an Emperor God, into a blood slave. Those were not the actions of a decent man. If he had allowed the 3 ancient era experts to remain, they would eventually pose a threat to the eternal chaotic world. Master! He Xiu reappeared in front of Jian Wushuang, his eyes full of fanaticism. He was a Sir God expert too. He could feel how powerful the two people Jian Wushuang had slain were. Unexpectedly, the two were much stronger than all those great emperors from the eternal chaotic world. But even when they teamed up, they were easily cut down by his master. The strength of his master, the backing of the real martial arts divine church, has now been removed. What happens next shall be left to Hall Master Wushuang. Let's go, Jian Wushuang said directly. Yes, He Xiao nodded. Immediately, He Xiao and Jian Wushuang left. When they left, the countless cultivators that had witnessed that battle were completely blasted away. Many cultivators had enjoyed watching that battle. The battle to them was perhaps the scariest battle they had seen in their lives. Too strong. They were too strong. Compared to them, let alone almighties, even an ordinary great emperor could not do anything. They also knew after that battle, the real martial arts divine church was truly over. Even though Jian Wushuang had removed those almighties and 3 ancient era experts, the real martial arts divine church was still around. But without the almighties and backings, the church would collapse in a matter of time. The lineage of stars would never forgive the church, and other forces would soon eat up their territory anyway. The real martial arts divine church had nothing to counter them with. Jian Wushuang was only in charge of wiping out the backings. He could not be bothered to handle the rest. Above the vast void, an ancient spaceship hurried away. In the ship, Jian Wushuang stood alone in a secret room, with the Blood Mountain sword floating in front of him. Xieyu, how does it feel? Not bad, right? Being suppressed? Jian Wushuang smiled as his voice was transmitted into the Blood Mountain sword. Xieyu was full of despair within the Blood Mountain sword. He was already suppressed by Jian Wushuang with a serious injury, with no time to recover. Being suppressed also meant that a large number of torture techniques were being used on him, courtesy of the Blood Mountain sword. There were many kinds of torture of the body, the mind, the soul. After Xieyu had been suppressed, he had been suffering from soul torture. So painful, even an ancient expert could not handle it. In the beginning, he had been cursing and shouting with no intention of bowing to Jian Wushuang. On the contrary, he had kept threatening Jian Wushuang to let him out, otherwise his brothers would definitely not let it pass. Even though Jian Wushuang had ignored him, Xieyu had still been confident. He believed his brothers would save him and crush this Jian Wushuang, ant for him. Sure enough, they had come and fought against Jian Wushuang. Xieyu had witnessed the fight clearly through the Blood Mountain sword. But he had not expected things to end up this way. Dead. His brothers had been killed by Jian Wushuang? No. Impossible. Xieyu was in disbelief, but eventually he had to accept the fact. It sent him into despair. If even his brothers could be slaughtered by Jian Wushuang, who would save him? Or who could? Now, Jian Wushuang's consciousness had finally arrived. You're the devil. Xieyu had completely lost it. The devil. Ha! You should have lived much longer than anyone here, but your mentality has been the same. Jian Wushuang felt disdain. The longer one lived, the stronger their mentality should be. But Xieyu, an ancient era expert, could not even fight against some Sir Gods in terms of mentality. Xieyu, I have some questions to ask you. Jian Wushuang asked. HNGH, you think he'll answer? Xieyu replied coldly. You will. Jian Wushuang smiled deviously. Xieyu, you know why I kept you but killed your 2 brothers? Because you're much easier to control. Jian Wushuang smiled. Control. Xieyu froze, but his face darkened greatly in the next moment. At the same time, Xieyu could feel a boundless soul power coming for him. Soul power. You want to use soul control on me? Wish on. Xieyu was enraged. Soul control was worse than death, no better than blood slaves. Regardless of if it was during the ancient era or the current era, Cultivators would rather die than allow themselves to be soul-controlled. Thus, Xie soul power in his consciousness, surged immediately, obviously wanting to resist. But soon he realized Jian Wushuang's soul power was so much stronger, and he simply could not resist. Chapter 22-28 Jian Air. I'm an ancient era expert. After all, I was a chaotic divine demon. Even though the restrictions on this earth greatly weakened my soul power, but not to the extent that a chaotic realm could control me, Xie could not believe what was happening. He did not know that 20,000 years ago, Jian Wushuang had used the soul-swallowing pearl to perform the 3 divine lights, a soul attack skill against Demon King Chenyu. In the 20,000 years of his sleep, his soul power had greatly improved. His soul attack was naturally stronger than the rest's. Jian Wushuang now, with his soul-swallowing pearl and nether light scripture from the 3 divine lights to help him with soul control, who could stop him? In addition, it had already been some time since Jian Wushuang had left the real martial arts divine church area. Why did he look for Xie now? Because Jian Wushuang wanted Xie to suffer just a bit more in the Blood Mountain sword, rendering him weak and defenseless. No, no. I will not let you control me even if it means death. Xie screamed, even about to ignite his soul. But soon he realized the soul power that had infiltrated his consciousness, had already corroded his soul power, controlling his consciousness. It would be wishful thinking to attempt to ignite his soul. Crap! Xie's face was dark as ash, but soon he started to calm down. Xie's 2 brothers were too strong for me to control, so I had to kill them. Xie's different. Jian Wushuang smiled. His soul power was already dominating Xie's consciousness, wiping away his consciousness. Within moments, the soul control was complete. As Jian Wushuang waved his hands, Xie appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Xie at that moment was very calm. Master! Xie respectfully stood beside Jian Wushuang, his gaze full of fanaticism. This sort of fanaticism was only found when one was completely under another's soul control. From today, your name shall be Jian Air, Jian Wushuang said. Yes, Xie. Now Jian Air nodded respectfully. Sit down. There are some things I would like to ask you, Jian Wushuang said. Jian Air immediately sat down in front of him. Talk to me about you and your brothers in the ancient era, Jian Wushuang said. Jian Air, being completely controlled by Jian Wushuang, showed no defiance and began talking about it. Master, my 2 brothers and I were from the ancient era's divine dream heaven sect, one of 8 big holy sections. Although we were nothing against the 3 big holy land and 4 big holy tribes, we were good. Divine dream heaven sect. Jian Wushuang nodded quietly. He knew about ancient era factions. The 3 big holy lands, 4 big holy tribes, and 8 big holy sects were all elite factions, and the 7-star black sect. There were many experts within the divine dream heaven sect. Us 5 brothers were all chaotic divine demon, but we were still nothing within the sect. Luckily, my eldest brother was the highest amongst chaotic divine demons, so we were able to obtain some resources. After the war broke out, the 5 brothers went into battle against the 7-star black sect, but during then number 3 and 4 fell, leaving the 3 of us, but in a stasis. The slumber lasted a very long time. We woke up once, but realizing the restrictions on this earth, went back to sleep. The 3 of you woke up once. Jian Wushuang frowned. Indeed, but we soon realized the era was completely different to the one we had lived in. The spiritual influence of heaven and earth was weak, and there are all sorts of restrictions. Under those circumstances, we won't be able to restore our powers. In fact, we would have lost our powers. Take me, for example. I was a chaotic divine demon in the ancient era, but when I woke up and stayed around, my maximum potential fell. Even if I reached pinnacle fighting power, it would be pinnacle chaotic realm. Jian Er said. What? Jian Wushuang flinched. It was better to not wake up. Waking up would gradually shred them of their powers. The land that they were in had that kind of power as well. Because of that, we had to continue to sleep to ensure our maximum potential would not drop, in hopes of eventually restoring pinnacle fighting power. Jian Er said, If that's the case, why have you all woken up once again? Why within the eternal chaotic world? Jian Wushuang asked. Because the chance we had been waiting for is finally here, Jian Er said. What chance? Jian Wushuang asked. 3,900 years later, heaven's horizon. Jian Er replied. What do you mean? Jian Wushuang was puzzled. We received news. 3,900 years later, someone at the heavens horizon will establish a link between this land and our homeland, back to the divine dream heaven sect. Jian Er said, solemnly. Hearing this, Jian Wushuang was full of questions. Back to your homeland, back to the divine dream heaven sect. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank. There are other lands beside this. No, not another land. This is the same land as my homeland, but someone locked it and isolated it completely. Jian Er said, Chapter 22-29 7-Star Divine Realm. Though Jian Wushuang was overwhelmed by this new information, he did not display his surprise. Actually, he had guessed it some time ago. The land was not the end point. The ancient era was not as simple as he had thought. He had confirmed that after the final battle between the three emperors' world, the blood emperor of the three emperors' world at that time had no intention of dominating or ruling the land. He had intended to destroy the entire eternal chaotic world. The Blood Emperor wanted to destroy all life within the eternal chaotic world to start his cruel formation. But what was his purpose? If the eternal chaotic world was really the end point, then what was the point of killing all life to reach a higher level? He would be alone then. If the Blood Emperor's motive was limited to the land, he would not have done that. The only explanation would be that there existed another wider land beyond the current one. Jian Er's words confirmed it. Jian Er, you mean the land I am on now is one with your homeland? What does that mean? Jian Wushuang inquired. Master, the land you are on, now the eternal chaotic world, was a part of my homeland absolute beginning divine world, under the 7-Star divine realm ruled by the 7-Star Black Sect, the powerhouse of the ancient era. Jian Er, powerhouse, stronger than divine dream heaven sect, I assume. Jian Wushuang said, Of course, divine dream heaven sect was strong, but nothing compared to the 7-Star Black Sect. Even the 8 big holy sects, for big holy tribes could not compare. The 7-Star Black Sect was the best in the ancient era. No one could say no. All the other factions had to step to one side, Jian Er said. Jian Wushuang could not help but shudder. He knew the 7-Star Black Sect was strong, but not that strong. Absolute beginning divine world should be the beginning of everything, and the end. But 7-Star Black Sect was the top force within the absolute beginning divine world. How strong were they? But even they were exterminated, Jian Wushuang could not help but sigh. Yes, they were strong. No one could take them on individually. But then, all the sects, 3 big holy lands for big holy tribes, 8 big holy sects, and countless divine demons fought their way into the 7-Star divine realm. About half of absolute beginning divine world's experts. Jian Er said, still in awe of what had happened. He had fought in that battle. He knew how terrifying that battle had been. But only with such a terrifying power could they enter the 7-Star divine realm. Jian Er, do you know why they attacked the 7-Star divine realm? Was it because they were too strong, pressuring the rest? Jian Wushuang said, I do not know. Jian Er shook his head. Master, there were too many experts then, countless divine demons, and many even higher than that. my 4 brothers, and I were inconsequential in that battle, like dust. Like dust. Jian Wushuang was shocked. Chaotic divine demons in the ancient era were nothing more than dust. It was too scary. We simply followed our sect's orders to kill all 7-star Black Sect experts. As for why the battle started, only my clan leader and top elder knew. The other elders were not even qualified to know, much less us. But it should not be because the 7-star Black Sect was too strong. They were strong, but they did not have many enemies. Without any specific reason, the other forces would never have agreed to work together. Jian Er said. Jian Wushuang nodded. The 7-star Black Sect must have known how to handle relations to become the absolute beginning divine world's powerhouse. There had to be another reason for them to force the other sects to exterminate the 7-star Black Sect. Jian Wushuang could not guess the reason for it either. Jian Er, continue. What happened after? Jian Wushuang asked. After that, with the 3 big Holy Land leaders leading the charge, they broke into the 7-star divine realm. The 7-star Black Sect resisted and fought back. The entire 7-star divine realm collapsed, turning into battlefield after battlefield. Countless experts died, fallen, missing. Even experts beyond chaotic divine demon levels fell. But ultimately, the 7-star Black Sect was defeated. They lost badly. All 7-star Black Sect disciples were killed. Only a few higher-ups were left struggling. But as the other experts were about to wipe out every 7-star Black Sect experts, one elite expert managed to activate a formation that opened the heavens. With that formation activated, 7-star divine realms, countless divine demons, and experts' divine power and blood essence were sucked away in a moment. Many experts felt it and managed to escape in time, but some did not. That formation became a huge blockade between the 7-star divine realm and absolute beginning divine world. As for the rest, I guess you already know, Master. Chapter 2232, Jian Wushuang fell silent. He knew what happened after that. After the land was blocked by the formation, cut away from the absolute beginning divine world, many experts, including the 7-star Black Sect that remained, were all damaged by it. The restriction had forced them to a deep slumber as well, leading to the end of the ancient era. Everything after that was publicly known. As the restriction grew larger, the spiritual influence of heaven and earth grew thinner, and with fewer experts than the first era, than the current second era. Do you know who placed the formation? Jian Wushuang asked. The expert was strong, even as good as the master of the Holy Land. I do not know of his past, but I heard the divine dream heaven sect leader mention a name. Jian Er said. Jian Wushuang's pupils shrank sharply. Xian Yi, his master, Xian Yi. When he had asked Jian Yi, he too had said that the formation that had led to experts into deep slumber was a man named Xian Yi. The formation was really placed by Master. Jian Wushuang was taken aback. He knew how scary the formation was. The formation forcibly split the land from the rest of the absolute beginning divine world. The absolute beginning divine world had countless experts, but could never come over. The restrictions were all caused by the formation. No wonder back at the Blood Emperor's sanctuary grounds, Master had been about to control and add the restrictions to Blood Emperor. Jian Wushuang murmured. The restrictions had been created by Xian Yi. The restrictions were from that formation. Xian Yi, being the creator of the formation, could naturally control it. Jian Wushuang thought to himself, and a painting floated in his mind. The painting was the same ancient image he had seen in the Chilly Wind Valley. The painting depicted a burly man with a big forehead, surrounded by countless experts. But even then, the man would not give up and crumbled heaven and earth. That image gave Jian Wushuang a feeling that it was the one Jian Er had just mentioned. The moves that the man made were probably to activate the formation. If that was the case, then the man's identity, Jian Wushuang shook his head and stopped thinking about it. Jian Er, since you received news about Heaven's Horizon opening a path 3,900 years later to absolute beginning divine world, that means it was not just the three of you that woke up, right? Jian Wushuang asked. Definitely, Jian Er nodded. But I do not know how many woke up. Jian Wushuang nodded, but that slightly stressed him. He was currently undefeatable in his era, but he was nothing compared to those ancient experts. If not for the restrictions, Jian Wushuang would be nothing but a tiny ant in their eyes. But even with the restrictions, those ancient era experts were not to be messed with. He took a deep breath and pulled out a token. Emperor by Jian Wushuang was transmitting to him. Jian Wushuang, what is it? Emperor Bai replied, I just came back from the Real Martial Arts Divine Church and met with some ancient era experts. Jian Wushuang said, Ancient era experts? You too? Emperor Bai's voice deepened. Two. Jian Wushuang's eyes squinted. Guess you know too. Transmission's not convenient. Come over to Thunderbolt Island. We can talk about this face to face. Emperor Bai said. Understood. Jian Wushuang nodded. Soon, he turned his ship to head towards Thunderbolt Island. Along the way, he continued to ask Jian Er some questions about the absolute beginning divine world and took time to investigate Jian Er and his brother's Qian Kuan ring. They were ancient era experts, after all. Their treasures were nothing ordinary. Jian Wushuang found many valuable items. 10-odd divine weapons when combining all three Qian Kuan rings. Each had a genuine chaos divine weapon with several defensive armors. There were 8 secret skills as well, all formidable, but it was a pity that Jian Wushuang had no use for it. There were fewer treasures, especially natural treasures and elixirs. Ancient era experts needed large amounts of natural treasures and elixirs to maintain their powers. It was no wonder that they had all been used up. That was why the 3 brothers had remained within the Real Martial Arts Divine Church. They had needed them to gather resources. The rewards were plentiful, though Jian Wushuang had no use for them. He could pass them down to Green Fire World and Lineage of Stars, especially the 8 secret skills. One of the secret skills of body refinery could not be compared to Jian Wushuang's immemorial celestial body, but was much better than Eternal Chaotic World's own protective secret skills. He passed it to Hishio immediately. After a simple check, Hishio found a use for it. After that, both of them went their separate ways. Hishio returned to the Lineage of Stars, whereas Jian Wushuang made his way to Thunderbolt Island. Thunderbolt Island, within the Presbytery Pavilion. The Presbytery Pavilion was where the higher-ups of the Sanctuary Alliance gathered, but only Emperor Bai was around. Emperor Bai could tell the moment Jian Wushuang stepped into the Presbytery Pavilion. A breakthrough. Emperor Bai looked at Jian Wushuang in surprise. He could sense a great change in Jian Wushuang's aura that can only happen when one advanced from the second stage of the 7th step to the final stage. Without a doubt, Jian Wushuang had surpassed himself. How could you do it so quickly? Emperor Bai was shocked. He practiced inverse cultivation as well. He knew how hard it was. It needed a large amount of divine power,